If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
Scenario. It's 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Your phone buzzes with an emergency alert. Simultaneous mass casualty events are being reported in 7 cities: Austin, Detroit, Norfolk, Denver, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Phoenix. The cellular network is already choking. Texts aren't going through. Calls won't connect. The emergency broadcast system kicks in on every radio and range. Reports are coming in of coordinated active shooter sprees at crowded districts, a bomb threat at a major airport locking down thousands, rolling blackouts hitting 2 metro grids as cyber attacks take down utility control systems. Law enforcement is overwhelmed within the first 40 minutes. This isn't a foreign battlefield. This is your country, and this is what we're covering tonight. The front line just moved into your zip code. The Iranian proxy warfare network is the primary hostile system driving this threat environment. This is not a conventional military force. It's a decades-old web of IRGC, Quds Force handlers, Hezbollah sleeper cells, criminal proxies, and digitally radicalized lone actors operating inside Western countries under false identities and ordinary lives. The network does not need to coordinate a single massive strike. It distributes pain across multiple targets simultaneously and lets the chaos multiply itself. What they want is simple: to make the cost of American foreign policy land directly on American civilians, to fracture public confidence in government protection, and to pressure Washington into backing down. Hezbollah, Hamas, and ISIS-inspired actors are the secondary arms of this machine. Different ideologies, same target. Welcome to Survival Dispatch News. It is March 16th, 2026, and I'm Chris Evan, the CEO of Survival Dispatch. I'm joined by combat wounded Green Beret Randy Nance, 26-year CIA case officer Jeff MD, and Green Beret Mike Glover. Command 11 founder Khalid Muhammad will be joining at the end of the broadcast to do a sit rep with me. So bottom line up front, global conflict is crossing the wire. The homeland threat environment is escalating as Iran's proxy networks, ISIS-inspired actors, and radicalized lone wolves position inside American communities right now. Why does it matter? Well, the next major attack on this country will not come from one organization. It will come from overlapping networks targeting civilian society simultaneously, and most American communities are not prepared for it. So what we're covering tonight is sleeper cell activation signals, extremist propaganda pipelines, lone actor radicalization, infrastructure as a primary target, and what unconventional warfare against civilians actually looks like when it lands in your city. So diving right into segment number 1, civil fracture, how a multi-city attack breaks American society before the shooting stops. The first casualty of a coordinated multi-city attack is not bodies. It is institutional trust. And once Americans stop believing that government can protect them, behavioral collapse follows faster than any kinetic damage. Panic buying strips grocery shelves in 72 hours. Fuel terminals see runs that exhaust regional supply within 96 hours, and hospital systems that were already operating near capacity tip into triage mode before the second wave of incidents lands. The economic fracture compounds the physical damage in ways the attackers count on. A civilian population managing simultaneous supply disruption, communications blackout, and active threat zones cannot coordinate a coherent response without pre-established local networks that government cannot provide. So let me get the gentleman on stage here, and I think we're going to get Mike up here as well. As per usual, I'm going to go to Jeff with the first question. Jeff, when Americans lose confidence that the government can protect them before the government can actually restore order, what does that behavioral collapse actually look like on the ground in the first 48 hours?
it looks like people taking matters into their own hands. People aren't just going to roll over and let some terrorists kill them. They will do what they have to do to survive. It's just human nature. And in a lot of places, especially blue cities, people aren't going to trust the police to do pretty much anything. Look at New York, look at Minneapolis, look at Los Angeles. Yeah, I wouldn't trust the police to do squat. Nothing wrong with the police, don't get me wrong, but they've been so hamstrung that they would be foolish to go out without a lawyer in their back pocket, because they could shoot a terrorist with a freaking bomb in his hands and they'd get dragged before a grand jury.
Yeah. So actually, let's just go off of the brief agenda for a second here. And Randy spoke to this before, but same question basically for Mike and Randy here. And Mike, I'll come to you first. What did it look like in the first 48 hours when cities fell in the Middle East and you were there, number one? But further to that, I want to hear your opinion and Randy's on when those people take matters into their own hands, there's usually a reckoning, at least in advanced societies. Did you ever see that happen over there where the looters, the marauders were actually held responsible for the shit that they did while all hell was breaking loose, or are they just not sophisticated enough countries?
Yeah, actually, in Muslim countries, generally speaking, because of people abiding by religious culture and protocol, there's not really shenanigans that happen like that. I mean, it does happen. Don't get me wrong, but like the middle-aged males that come out of the woodwork, they're not coming out to steal TVs at the local bazaar. They're coming out to get their jihad on. They're coming out to actually fight the enemy. And so it's very different. Here, what you would see are like multi-tiered threats that are going to evolve because of the opportunities and people wanting to exploit those opportunities. And so you're going to have an entire criminal syndicate of cartels and gangs and organized crime taking advantage in an organized criminal way. You're going to have rioters and exploiters come out where you don't see that overseas. What you will see is guys grab AKs, RPGs out from underneath their bed or the hay in their barn and come out and try to get their jihad on. So it's very different because, I mean, they walk the walk in many ways. Here, a lot of the chaos and calamity that takes place, like what you saw in BLM and Antifa riots that were advertised as peaceful protests, is opportunists committing acts of violence against people to take advantage of people, not because they were bought into the ideology. Look at the protesters now that are protesting Iran or the Iran conflict, protesting the killing of the Ayatollah. None of those protesters are from the local community. I mean, I think there was a protest in rural Idaho, and people were like, there's not even that many people in the town. All these people were imported in to create this conflict, to show up because there was an arrest of an individual that happened to be an illegal immigrant and criminal. And everybody's like, where the hell do these people come from? That's even another component of it, is you have paid activists who are now being utilized and leveraged. That doesn't happen overseas. Like if there's a fallout, the people that you're confronted with are adversaries and or associates of the fallout, and in some rare cases, just people that want to jump on the bandwagon, but they're not opportunists who are trying to exploit innocent people.
So before I go to Randy, and we're not attorneys, we're not giving anybody legal advice. Randy and I were discussing CCW Safe, U.S. Law Shields, etc. before we went live. In your crystal ball, like speculating, Mike, if somebody is in a state like California, New York, Washington, whatever the case may be, and all hell breaks loose and they have to take matters into their own hands and they get involved in shooting somebody, do you believe there'll be a reckoning for that afterwards, like a legal reckoning that the state will try and, take them to task and charge them and potentially convict them and lock them up? Or do you think that in an SHTF situation, they might show some grace?
No, I don't. I think there'll be reckoning. I mean, what I do think, and I lived in Amador County in Northern California, a great town called Jackson, California, right near South Lake Tahoe. And the county sheriff was like, I'm not going to enforce any unconstitutional laws. So you're kind of protected, but you get a false sense of security because the SBI, the state bureau, can come in and charge you from the state level, right? So you could be a law-abiding citizen and you're in a town where the sheriff puts out an ordinance and says, I'm not going to enforce any of these state laws because they're unconstitutional. You get rolled up, the state comes in, and then they might even tip off the feds, and then you're looking at federal or state crimes. For sure, this happens right now. If you're in San Diego is a great example. In San Diego, the local sheriff is allegedly, I don't know this to be a fact, allegedly a conservative and supports gun rights for individuals. And it is straight shenanigans in San Diego. I mean, just wild stuff. The last time I was there doing Jocko's podcast, I'm eating like a fish sandwich at a local place, and a naked homeless person jumped the low gate in an open area on the beach with kids everywhere, butt ass naked, not even a tuck back, just letting it hang. Jumps the fence, grabs some dude's sandwich, and it runs. And then there's a helicopter and police pursuing him. And I'm like, this is like a movie. Well, if you're in that situation and you engage him, good luck. Because for sure, the most extreme thing about California isn't right-wing extremists or even left-wing radicals. It's the government under Gavin Newsom. And so for sure, the state attorney is going to prosecute any American who's trying to defend their life because they prefer supporting criminals and illegal immigrants, especially that are criminals, over their own sovereign citizens. That's my opinion on it.
And I couldn't agree more. Well said, Mike. So, Randy, we've talked about you being in Baghdad when Baghdad fell, but one of the questions I never asked you, were any of the regular Iraqi citizens, not the marauders, not the looters, were any of the average citizens armed, and did they stand their ground against the looters and the marauders? And then after the fact, were any of those looters and marauders taken to task by us, seeing as their government? You know, I have to believe Mike and obviously believe what you say, but did we take any action around those people up? I've never asked you that either, and hold them accountable.
No, the short answer to that is no. But, you know, as far as I know, that's the last time it's happened. Right now, we might suspect or surmise that if Iran completely fail and leadership's completely gone, there's a moment of peace there. And that's exactly what we're talking about, because you have to go back to 2003. And then we took Baghdad and it was over and they called it done, basically. There was a certain level of a moment of peace. You know, all the Iraqis were happy, you know, kind of like what we see with Iranians right now. They're cheering and happy, the people that want this regime gone. We saw the same thing. So that, I think that's what lent to that, right? Because then, like I said, we didn't hold anybody accountable. They let people loot for 3 straight days. And I didn't, you know, we were all in checkpoints. And of course, we had military positions all over Baghdad. And we were all out. Like I said, I was on the street by a railroad and a fairly large roads and intersection. So I could see quite a bit going on. But nobody was armed. None of those people were armed. And when they came out to loot, these were just the masses of people, you know. And the other thing we also have to take into account is how poor these people really are, right? They're not like us. They're not like your average American. And even the poor Americans are pretty rich compared to their standards over there. So we might not see the same type of activity. Plus, the biggest difference there will still be action going on when these attacks, or if anything like this was to happen here, there would be strife right after. What I'm talking about, when the looting happened in Baghdad, it was after everything was over, and it was the first 3 days of that regime was gone, and everybody was kind of partying, but they were still looting. And when I told you that, and it was biblical level of looting. I've never seen where it just seemed like every citizen that lived in Baghdad was outside and either in a vehicle, on a donkey cart, or walking and carrying. everything off. And it's not like here. So you don't have Walmarts and then Targets and all these, the Apple store, because even Baghdad had market areas, and that's where people would go to shop. So it's a little different scenario all the way around together. So I don't know that we'll ever see looting here, but we never held those people accountable. And it really wasn't until after that 3 days, because when I say level of biblical, that's so people can get an understanding. There was no room anywhere. When I say it was like a big ant hill had been disturbed and the ants were out everywhere, that's how it was. And so then after 3 days, when the orders came down, they said, okay, we're not going to let them loot anymore. We're going to put an end to this. They were a little upset at first, but people went back home and stopped. But literally about right then is when, criminals started coming out. And over the next couple of weeks, there was a lot we had to deal with there. But regardless, I think it's a completely different situation than what would go on here. And again, those people are dirt poor. Most people here can't even fathom, even if you're on here and poor, you're not as poor, because as I've described it, and I don't know what Mike's experience was, Baghdad was a little different, but certainly out in all the countrysides and any of the countries I've been in out like that, those people don't have stoves and kitchens. They had a Bunsen burner, as I described, and they don't have anything in their hut, their house. They don't have furniture, they don't have any of that stuff. So the 3 days of looting was probably also a product of that. They don't have anything. So then they were all happy and partying. So I guess the next thing was just start taking everything. I don't really know. I don't know how that transpired and how it got to that, but I know it lasted for 3 days. And then once it was over, it was over. Nobody went out and held them responsible. When I say everything was stolen, that's from buses, every vehicle, every piece of furniture, and the next day, literally after that, every day we could go out and I could go out with some money, because it was still hard to call back home. We didn't just have phones everywhere. And I certainly, as a private, didn't have a satellite phone, but there were now vendors on the street with satellite phones, and you could go up there for 10 or 15 bucks and buy a few minutes off their phone to call back home. So that was my experience. Yeah.
I appreciate the extended explanation. Somebody said they can't hear 007. Khalid will be joining at the end of the broadcast, and Khalid and I will be doing a sit rep from there forward. So, Jeff, I've asked a similar question before, but I want to kind of split it in half. And it's with regards to supply chains, food, fuel, and medicine in particular. Let's say we've got this multi-city attack, okay? How fast do those supply chains break down in the cities that are attacked? But what's the effect in the cities that aren't attacked, whether it's the IRGC or Al-Qaeda that sends a signal and says attack 20, 30 American cities simultaneously?
Well, they're going to obviously break down in the cities that are attacked first, because people are going to hunker down. Delivery drivers, trucks, things like that aren't going to drive into an area that's, fighting terrorism, as we speak. So they'll be impacted almost instantaneously. And even when there isn't a breakdown in the supply chain itself, you're going to have businesses will shut down. Pharmacists aren't going to go to work. Drugstores won't open. People are going to hunker down at home until they get an all clear from the government. So even if they have prescription drugs, there's going to be no one there to fill them. The cities that aren't attacked, it will be slower. And I think you're going to run into a lot of paralysis by analysis. People are going to say, okay, before we go anywhere, we need to have a full 360-degree view of what's going on in Tucson. Well, even if Tucson's not attacked, they're going to be reluctant to do anything until they have somebody somewhere assuring them that that's the right answer. And a lot of that is they don't want to get sued. If you send a driver into an area and he gets shot, okay, you're on the hook for that. Even if you didn't shoot him, they're going to say, well, you should have known. Well, maybe you should have, maybe you shouldn't have. But I think you're going to see a lot of that. And we saw that with in Charlie 19, you're going to get panic buying. People are going to buy stuff even when it's not in short supply, just because they're afraid that sometime, maybe in the future, it will be. People who bought a year's worth of toilet paper just blow me away. It's like, how many craps are you going to take while you're locked down at home? The same number you would if you weren't locked down at home. Maybe fewer, because you're not going to have any food. But yeah, there's the human factors aspect of it. Well, people, when they're in a panic, do stupid stuff.
Yeah, fair enough. So before we go into segment 2, Jeff, just because you're like our walking, talking encyclopedia here at SDN, are there any historical examples of, some civil event, during some sort of calamity, let's say, that gives us, I don't know, maybe a blueprint for what happens when multiple American cities are attacked, and then first responders and the whole system gets overloaded? Overwhelmed is probably the right word. Is there anything in history that even comes close to giving us some directional information?
Probably the closest thing would be Charlie 19. I mean, you had people shutting down stuff that there was absolutely no reason for it to be shut down, but they did it. They panicked. They shut down schools. They shut down hospitals. They shut down nursing homes. They shut down churches, and for absolutely no real reason. They just thought, well, we have to show activity. We have to show the public we're doing something, even if it's the wrong thing. But as far as supply chains breaking down like that, I think Iraq would probably be the closest, because that was a total government collapse. I mean, the Nazis didn't collapse as bad as the Iraqis did.
Wow. Okay. Great analogy there. So let's.
Did you see the Archangel said, Jeff, eat MREs and you won't need toilet paper?
Yeah, you'll be plugged up forever. What you'll need is an enema bag.
Mike has actually spoken at length on that, and colonoscopies and all sorts of things. That's
having lived on MREs in Afghanistan, take my word for it. The chocolate bars, I swear to God, are made by X-Lax.
Oh, that's too funny. All right, let's get into segment number 2 here, which is the network architecture, how overlapping threat actors operate without central command. The most dangerous aspect of the current threat environment is not any single organization. It's the convergence of IRGC proxy assets, Hezbollah sleeper cells, ISIS-inspired homegrown actors, and digitally radicalized lone wolves who share no command structure but share the same target. Iran's Quds Force does not need to send orders to every operative. It activates via coded shortwave transmissions, encrypted messaging apps, digital propaganda ecosystems that they were already seeding, these radicalized networks inside the United States long before Operation Epic Fury launched. The ISIS digital recruitment pipeline has specifically targeted teenagers and young naturalized citizens, meaning the next attacker may have no foreign travel history, no known affiliation, and no detectable pre-attack communication, which is exactly what makes this threat architecture different from anything that came before 9/11. So there's a reason that we're going in this direction tonight. As you've heard Khalid mention previously, for 9/11 2.0 to mimic what happened in Mumbai in 2008, so complex coordinated terrorist attacks, where you have these command centers of people watching live media, social media, and body cams on jihadis and orchestrating the attacks, telling the sleeper cells, go here, go there, stay where you are, first responders are almost there, so on and so forth. Well, you've got Syria, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. And it looks like the Pakistanis have absolutely annihilated Al-Qaeda's command and control operations in Afghanistan. We've put a major hurt on Iran. So that means that things are pivoting and changing as far as these upcoming terrorist attacks on America are concerned. And you're going to hear from Tulsi Gabbard over the next couple of days, Ratcliffe as well as Patel. But I bring this up because it's highly likely now that we will not see some people in command and control positions orchestrating this. It'll be more chaotic and all hell breaking loose. So I want to come to you on that topic, Mike. how does this, I'm hesitant to call them a network because they're not joined at the hip, but let's just use the word network. We'll call them a threat network. And when they're operating without these central command, these command and control guys, there's nobody to coordinate all these simultaneous, multi-city attacks. What are the activation mechanics that still allow it to unfold? Is it just, hey, those guys are attacking, we're going to jump in, or is there something else to it?
Yeah, I mean, it could be geopolitical. It could be time and place. It could be basic. I mean, it could be an opportunity at your desire, or an afforded opportunity that's going to, get the best results. I mean, the 9/11 hijackers had a date, right? They backwards planned off a date. They got in country. These guys were going to bars and strip clubs, and they were also going to Embry-Riddle and Daytona Beach and getting flight training. And then they all executed flawlessly, very decentralized. So it's not that complicated. And especially now with a very, I think it was Tucker Carlson talked about it, and he spoke about the Ayatollah. The Ayatollah represents a large portion or population of the Islamic faith that are Shia. And, if me and Randy had been in Iraq, I had 5 or 6 rotations to Iraq. Sadr City was the place that you knew you're going to likely take a casualty and kill a lot of bad guys. It's because every time we entered Sadr City, which was contained, and they called it, it was basically a baseball field. You entered in home plate at first, second, and third. And when we went in there, the fight was on. We might have as well been going into Iran when we were going into Sadr City, because everybody was held up, material supported, training, the equipment, etc. And it's like, if you go to America and your job is to wreak havoc at a time of your choosing, and the Ayatollah gets killed, that might be the grow criteria for you. The covert communications means where this entity was from Iran was putting out information on radio, and repeating numbers. Yeah, I guess you could do that to activate sleeper cells, but you don't need to do that. I mean, it could be conditions. It could be, hey, if the regime falls, you know what to do. So it doesn't have to be overcomplicated, especially as people are decentralized. My worst fear is it's like 9/11, and it's a very specific date, October 7th of 2026. The last Friday of Ramadan here in March, and like next week. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. I just think each one could be more effective if they're coordinated via decentralized means, like it was done on 9/11 with 19 hijackers, but more than 19 likely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So two questions for you, Mike, and then I'll come to you, Randy. Number one, you mentioned Sadr City was contained. I know what that means. Some people in the audience may not know what that means. So maybe explain that first. And then ISIS has invested really heavily in digital radicalization inside the United States. Maybe describe what that looks like, the ISIS online radicalization stuff.
Yeah, so first, it was contained, Sadr City was contained in Iraq by literal barriers, HESCO barriers. In fact, Chris Kyle, many people have heard of him, all those kills that he got mostly were done, partially done during the wall build in Sadr City when we were putting these large T barriers up around the entire city. I don't know the population off the top of my head, millions. A lot of people that were originally contained in their city by Saddam Hussein because they were a threat. I mean, Saddam Hussein was brutal to the Shias, and there were many justifications for that. And in fact, that's one of the variabilities or characteristics of the argument behind why you don't take out a lot of these dictators, because they have, a hammer and sickle in some cases, suppressing some of these people who are likely to come out of the woodwork and be radical extremists. And, some argument is you're forcing them underground. Well, what we found was when we started putting up those walls, they started attacking American forces. And that a lot of the snipers on the SEAL side were getting a lot of kills of bad guys during that period, because they would have to bring out heavy equipment that was armored while they're getting shot up with PKM machine guns, just trying to put up a barrier. As I ripped in as a sniper, I was on a rooftop and like, oh, this is going to be a great mission set. And then we moved all the wall build to nighttime ops. And then the enemy knew, because we had drones. I remember very vividly laying on top of a rooftop with an SR-25 with a laser, hunting bad guys and getting angry because I could hear drones flying overhead at night. And I'm like, they're never going to come out because they know they're going to get eviscerated off the planet. And at the time, we weren't flying AC-130 or MC-130 gunships or drones during the daylight over Solder City, because they were shooting at them, which they do routinely. And so eventually we got the wall built all the way around it, and we would have to enter home base through one checkpoint, and everybody knew that we were coming into the town. I mean, we were tracking a comm station that was communicating exactly when we were coming in, and we were trying to geolocate it and drop a bomb on it, but couldn't figure out where it was. But the vehicle in front of me once going into Solder City took an EFP straight from Iran, where it cut through the back of this. It was a SIGINT vehicle right in front of me, and tore up all of the SIGINT EW electronic warfare equipment. And it could have been my entire team. I mean, we could have took it. I was on the turret. I could have just took it right through the chest, like 3 Navy SEALs before us. Very dangerous circumstance. And the best tactic that we had at the time was containing them, because it was so out of control. And then when you look at ISIS is very novel in how they spit their propaganda. I was analyzing their intel and telling everybody it was going to be a big deal and disseminating it across my company, my special forces company, when this was happening, because we were seeing these videos where I think one of the first videos was them driving by a vehicle, and it was Iraqis, and it was when everything seemed like it was going well, and they just mowed down this vehicle and put it online and put some good music behind it with some font overlays of text saying that, the war is basically not over, it's just begun. And so everybody was basically turning over into this new hyper extreme organization, Al Qaeda 2.0. And so the best tactic they utilized was the magazine Inspire, which was widely disseminated through PDF all throughout the globe to anybody who would upload it or download it. And that was basically a newsletter from Al Qaeda and ISIS disseminating what they were doing, their active campaign. And that was inspiring kids across the entire region who grew up in dirt, like Randy said, dirt poor, and had nothing going for them, to pick up arms against the infidel and actually live out their ideology that they've been practicing in mosques across the region. On top of that, the decentralization of communications via that internet messaging to all the imams who were disseminating it over loudspeakers throughout the entire region, getting people called to action. I mean, this is very effective means of disseminating information. Jesus walked thousands of miles on foot. He didn't have social media, and started an entire movement, and so did Muhammad. So it's like these regions love word of mouth, and they love simple communications, and then you hyperbolically disseminate that with good media and propaganda. What do you think is going to happen? The biggest movement, the Fortune 500 of terrorist organizations, is what happened.
I appreciate the extended explanation, or description, I should say. One of the guys in the chat, he's here with us frequently, Mike Gunner, mentioned how the 20th took lots of casualties building the wall. And so I know 3 different individuals who were not working together, but were in Solder City and did the exterior wall to lock everybody in, like you mentioned, Mike, and then to build the interior wall that basically cut Solder City in half, bad guys on one side, supposed good guys on the other side. And all three of them said to me while they were putting up that divider down the middle of Solder City that they would literally pop their head up, drive a fastener in it for these wall sections they're attached together, and then duck, and then the shots would come right where they were standing seconds before. And it sounds like absolutely brutal conditions doing any type of construction.
Just real quick, the real heroes during that whole campaign were those big Army guys doing that were moving skid steers and heavy equipment to move those walls with little to no protection, except for, the snipers that can get on rooftops and take bad guys out. It's easy to be a special operations guy with nods and a laser on a rooftop with a predator overhead. It's very hard to be a regular Army guy in a tractor pushing dirt or pushing barricades to set in place.
Yeah, it's unimaginable. So, Randy, coming back to you, when we've got Iranian proxy assets, Hezbollah sleeper cells, ISIS-inspired actors, radicalized lone wolves, all operating here in America, and without the coordination from Al-Qaeda, like the original plan was, can law enforcement even prioritize that at all? I mean, how do you just speculate? How do you tackle that from a law enforcement perspective when it's just a chaotic mess before, during, and after?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I have to wonder myself. I'm certain New York City has probably, their police department has probably done some sort of terrorist training since September 11th, right? But I would bet most law enforcement agencies didn't do too much of that beforehand. And then you have to go across the country. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that because that terrorism isn't something that law enforcement was really geared towards. And now we hear them say that basically, cops weren't here to stop the crime. Basically, they're here to, go after and investigate it. So I don't know what, in terms of terrorism, what law enforcement's policies are, or what type of training that they've come up with as a result of. It would be, I wish we had somebody on law enforcement or something. I don't know. Maybe Mike knows because he's worked with some sniper teams and some other law enforcement. But I think that's an excellent question. I don't know what the answer would be.
So I've spoke with multiple former NYPD cops. I had dinner with a bunch of them at Mar-a-Lago last time Cindy and I were there. I've spoken to cops across the entire country. I've spoken to paramedics across the entire country. And every last one of them, Randy, said that right after 9/11, they came out with a whole bunch of SOPs on how to handle various scenarios. And as time has gone on, it just fell off the radar to a guy who worked with Keith Graves for 20 years. We had dinner together in Vegas during SHOT Show, and he said it's been about 10 years since they did any of those drills. It's mind-blowing.
Well, you think about it. One of the things we always talked about when it comes to cut money, first thing they're going to do is cut training, right?
Yeah.
And then as time went by, just like you said, it becomes less and less of a priority because there hasn't been another instance. And now that we're 25 years down the road and looking at a possible another one, I would venture to guess that most law enforcement agencies in this country, if not all of them, are inadequately they're just not ready for it. And then we look at the FBI, and the only instances we have of the FBI lately are either they don't know what's going on, or there was somebody on their radar, or they were actually involved in the events.
Right.
So, I mean, geez.
So let's do this. Khalid's backstage. I'll bring him on in a minute for the final question for this segment. We'll move into the next segment. But Jeff and Mike, can either one of you shed any additional light on what Randy just said as far as the preparedness or lack thereof for law enforcement?
Well, I'm not law enforcement, so I can't speak to that, but I'll just look at society in general. Back in the 50s, we had fallout shelters. We had everybody, there was emergency food down there. The kids in school practice duck and cover and all that. Are there more or less nuclear weapons in the world today? Are there more or less ICBMs that are capable of delivering nuclear weapons today? Well, there's more. So the threat theoretically is bigger than it was in 1950s. Yet we did something about it then. We haven't done anything about it since the 60s.
That's yeah. Mike, your thoughts on preparedness levels of law enforcement across the country?
Yeah, when I get out of the military and I transitioned to the National Guard, I was a master sergeant in Texas. I was a team sergeant in Texas before I made sergeant major, and had an ODA and put myself out there and said, hey, I'm available for training, and got post-certified and federally certified to train, but post-certified for law enforcement training in California. And I taught my specific bringing me on in category for post-certification was I was teaching counterterrorism and terrorist tactics to law enforcement. And when I first started doing this in 2015-16 timeframe, I was focused on Al-Qaeda tactics, especially suicide bombers, and they were super proactive, especially in Central California, all over. I was in Monterey, all over Central Valley, and then some places in LA. They were super proactive. Like, hey, Mike, teach us what to do when we come across a suicide bomber, because you go into a scene and you're aiming center mass. Well, you don't want to detonate, the activator or the vest of a terrorist. That'd be bad tactics. This whole idea of like, don't shoot in the chest because they might have body armor. Like, criminals don't typically wear body armor. Terrorists for sure will wear body armor, getting their jihad on. And we were focused on shot placement. We were focused on, hey, maybe it's not worth you kicking in the front door of a breach point, because that's what you do every single time, and you do 99.9% of the time, you never get shot at. But if you go into this situation, the reason we do call outs is because it's not worth our life. If there's a guy in there going to clack himself off, well, you get standoff, get containment, and then you call them out. And then in our case, we drop a JDAM on them. In your case, you just wait. You gas them, you send robots in, but you don't just kick in the door. Very, very impactful training at first. And then, just like everything in our country, we get super complacent. San Bernardino, I taught San Bernardino SWAT. And what did they run into? 2 jihadists, including a female, that they had to engage. In fact, one of the guys who was shot during this, who engaged, he got shot in a different incident that happened to be a jihadist event, and then ended up killing the female jihadist who was getting her jihad on. And they still deal with that, and they're going to deal with it in the future, but they got super complacent. Not the guys. They never really do. The leadership and then the institutions, they're just like, we don't really need it. And they started looking at special operators, SEAL Team 6 guys, me, other guys training law enforcement as a huge liability. They started weighing it and going, ooh, do we want these guys coming in and teaching some kind of specific ROE that we don't have? We never got into that, but that was their fear. And believe it or not, as of like 3 years ago, it's almost unheard of now to see a lot of special operations guys teach law enforcement because of that stigma of liability.
Oh, that's just brutal. So let me bring Khalid on stage. Good to see your avatar, Khalid.
Yeah, we're back for a bit.
So just bringing you in the middle of this conversation, I want to hear your thoughts on what the role is, whether it be criminal proxies, like cartels, MS-13, TDA, those types of networks, plus Antifa and other bad actors just playing as, say, force multipliers for the jihadis when the next attack or attacks, plural, happen.
Well, the interesting part, Chris, is that they've already run this model. Back in 2011, the attack they carried out on the Saudi ambassador in Washington, D.C. was a test of their model. What Iran has done is they have linked up with cartels. They've linked up with bad actors. They've distributed all of the decision-making among 31 commanders inside of Iran and in Europe and in Latin America that operate outside of the IRGC's command. So they are looking at conditions. Now, that's something people need to understand. They are not waiting for a green light to come from Iran. They are looking for certain conditions to be fulfilled, and then they give a green light to carry out the attack. So whatever, even if it's like we said last week when we were talking about this, even if you wipe out the entire IRGC in Iran, these bad actors, these sleeper cells can still be activated and carry out an attack. And that's something that people need to understand, is that this is not working on the same terrorist model that we're used to, where there's a commander, there's a command and control structure. This is completely decentralized. Power has been given to the on-ground commander to make a decision.
I appreciate that, Clete. Thank you. So we're going to go directly into segment number 3, which is the soft target problem, why civilian infrastructure is the primary objective. Asymmetric warfare doctrine targets civilian infrastructure specifically because it produces cascading failures that military targets do not. A successful strike on a power grid, water treatment plant, or fuel terminal multiplies damage across an entire region without a single additional attacker required. Iran's Carver matrix, and I'll expand on that in just a second, analysis of U.S. soft targets evaluating criticality, accessibility, recuperability, vulnerability, and effect and recognizability, points to schools, houses of worship, transit hubs, hospitals, and crowded nightlife districts as highest value targets because they're both psychologically devastating and operationally easy. The drone threat dimension adds a layer that most American communities are completely unprepared for. Commercial drone technology weaponized for delivery of IEDs or incendiary devices is cheap, accessible, and nearly impossible to interdict without federal counter UAS capability that most law enforcement does not have. So Carver is an acronym that was originally developed by our special forces for two purposes: offensive strike planning and defensive planning when somebody's going to attack us. So the acronym breaks down like this. So C is criticality. How critical is the target to the overall system? If it goes down, how badly does everything else break? The A is accessibility. How easy is it to physically access the target? What barriers exist? Fencing guards, geography, access controls. The R stands for recuperability. How long it takes to recover or replace the target after it's hit. A substation that takes 18 months to replace scores very differently than a target with a 48-hour turnaround. The V stands for vulnerability. How susceptible is the target to the type of attack being considered? A concrete dam, for example, scores much differently against a truck bomb than it does against a cyber attack on its control systems. And the E stands for effect. What is the downstream impact of the surrounding population, economy, or military capability? Does hitting this target cause cascading failures elsewhere? And the R, recognizability. How easily can an attacker identify and confirm the target under operational conditions, including under stress at night or with minimal reconnaissance? So the way it goes down is that each element scored, and then the combined score helps a planner rank targets by priority. On the offensive side, it tells you what to hit first. On the defensive side, it tells you what the adversary is likely to hit first. So analysts apply the Carver framework to U.S. soft target categories to essentially identify which civilian infrastructure presents the highest combined score to an adversary. And this is all done during pre-attack planning. So, Jeff, I'm going to open with you per usual. Walk us through what a coordinated infrastructure strike against civilian systems looks like in a mid-sized American city. What goes first versus what cascades second? And if major systems like power, water, and are taken down, how long does this turn into an apocalyptic scenario, essentially?
Well, the first thing you want to go after is electric power, because so many other systems rely on it. So if you take down the power grid, then you've taken down the water system, because the water system, they have towers, but they require pumps to put the water in the tower. That's just to maintain your water pressure. Then the water going into the system, unless it's pumped out of the ground and is potable from the get-go. Some places are like that. Most are not. They draw from lakes and rivers, and that water has to be treated. Well, those treatment plants require electricity, and then they also require chemicals, things that cause the particles to settle, and then of course chlorine to kill bacteria. Then what else can go is the Well, the traffic system will go because there's going to be no traffic lights, and that's just going to be chaos. You've got the natural gas system will go because it requires compressors to maintain the gas pressure. Compressors generally run on electricity. Some of the big gas pipelines, they will have gas-powered compressors, to do that, and they kind of supply their own fuel, but most cities don't have that setup. And the problem is when the gas power, when power goes out, and then they can bring it up, they just turn the switch and you're back on. With gas, they have to turn off service to every house, and they have to go individually and turn on the gas to every house because they have to relight pilot lights, make sure there are no leaks, things like that. So it's a much longer process to bring the gas system back up as opposed to the power system. And then, of course, communications follows because cell phones, cell towers, landlines, everything requires electricity. So, and a lot of them will have battery backups and generators, but they have limited fuel on site because they're only designed to run until the power comes back up. Well, if the power's down for a week, you're screwed.
Yeah, for sure. So I've got a drone question for you, Mike, a drone question follow-up for you, Khalid, and Randy. You're going to close this segment out with the fifth and final question in the brief if you want to have a look at that before we get to that point. Mike, I haven't had you discuss drones in depth on our podcast before, but I'd like to know your opinion on the realistic drone threat to American soft targets right now. And what does a low-tech, commercially available drone attack on a crowded venue or a utility node actually look like in practice?
Yeah, so drones. So I have expertise in drones. I've been to almost in my era of GWAT veteran, I was a drone guy. I had expertise in technical surveillance and reconnaissance for Delta Force. And I used to work with, high-level organizations, including DARPA, to down select for the Special Operations Command, but also for the military, drone technology and integration into operations. I actually flew drones during combat operations as a Green Beret on the SF side, and as a Delta guy, I flew some of the UAV Wasp that's super outdated now that had a 3.6 kilometer range on target to get situational awareness during ambushes, for example. So the difference in how drones have evolved is now because there was a military line of funding and allocation of resources, and then there was a private line, a commercial line. Well, the commercial line exceeded the military line because we didn't put our eggs in one basket and we didn't focus on emerging that technology. I actually have old memos and emails where I was begging the command to focus on drone tech because I thought it was going to change a lot of how we, operated on the battlefield and how we gained situational awareness, and helped with some programs, including the micro drones that we fly into targets now instead of sacrificing dogs. I've lost 2 dogs on target, one dog that saved my life. And I'm like, why are we losing dogs even? We don't need to sacrifice any lives, sacrifice the technology. So in the United States, the crazy thing about our circumstance now is we look at Iranian drones being flown from Iran into, name the Gulf state 6th country and the United Arab Emirates. And we look at Qatar, we look at Saudi, and we go, oh, that's a huge threat. What we're not paying attention to is commercial drones, commercial off-the-shelf technology, and them modifying that to use on attacks. You can get a Best Buy DJI drone right now, and you could hack it, modify it, and drop a grenade on a crowd full of people. I mean, you could do that right now. I don't think it will be used in that manner. I think you would use a drone to do something like that to scare the hell out of people, to get them to break contact, and then just mow them down with a gun, a machine gun, an AK-47. I don't think, like when we look at drones and mass swarm attacks, I just had a mass swarm demonstration like in the rural area of my town where they were practicing for July 4th for this, this coming July 4th. And then you look at China and their integration of mass drone. Sure, we need to be on the up and up for foreign adversaries. I'm talking about sleeper cells that are here now that can get their hands on equipment that is here. You can go online on Alibaba and buy every single drone made in China and shipped here with no oversight of those drones, and integrate whatever explosive TATP, whatever you want to be able to cause that attack. You can even do it in bulk. I imagine some intelligence organization is probably tracking those type of things, but maybe not. Maybe we don't have the resources to do that. So it is something scary and something that we have to pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the extended information. So y'all may have noticed Jeff's shirt tonight says Surviving Man, and that's our good friend Don Mann. He was a Navy SEAL for 20 years. Then he was CIA for 23 years. After that, Mike and I were shooting one of the seasons of Surviving Man that Jeff wasn't at. And it was the end of a very long day. And I'm just going to tell this as quick as I can, but it was the end of a very long day. Don Mann gets these people up at ungodly hours and then puts them through PT and takes them out in Florida swamps in the middle of the night that are covered up in gators and water moccasins and has them run these reconnaissance missions. It's some pretty crazy stuff. But Mike was telling a story. I don't know if it's the same dog or not, but it's been a long time since I've mentioned this. And Mike basically told, there's probably like 3 dozen people sitting under this pavilion on how this dog saved his life and saved the whole team's life, because these jihadis were in this long grass beside them. And Mike was fixing to go into the long grass. And the canine guy said, no, stop. We'll send the dog in. That dog got killed by those jihadis. And Mike and the rest of the guys eliminated the threat. But the FBI has been saying for about 50 years now that most of the most horrific criminals out there, like Jeffrey Dahmer, those types of people, they always start with hurting defenseless animals, dogs, cats, you name it. And then it continues to escalate from there. And my wife and I, we rescue pit bulls, and, we have a thing for dogs. There wasn't a dry eye underneath that pavilion as Mike Glover was telling that story, including himself. And Mike has been through some incredible stuff, incredibly good and incredibly bad stuff. But if anybody wants to know what type of metal Mike Glover's made out of, he's the real deal. He's got a huge heart. And it was one of the craziest war stories I've ever heard anybody tell. And I'll be quite honest, Mike Glover's name is so heavy, I drop it all the time. Proud to call him a friend. So put it that way. So Khalid, coming to you for the second part of this. What's the gap between federal counter drone capability and what state and local law enforcement is equipped with to handle it? And how big is that gap? I mean, do we have anything at the federal level that trumps what the local guys have? I'm not talking Leonidas systems like the military has, but give me some good news here, Khalid. You got good news for once?
Well, I never bring good news, Chris. You know that. The only time I bring good news is when we're bombing something in Afghanistan. The problem we have with drone technology is, like Mike was saying, that most people don't understand how much technology has advanced on the off-the-shelf commercial drone. You can do so much with that drone that the jihadis have made it a tactical weapon. And we've experienced it here in Pakistan. I mean, the drones the drones that they were using in Pakistan were literally the stuff they were buying off the shelves in Islamabad, Lahore, Peshawar, Karachi, and modifying them with explosives, modifying them to drop mortars, modifying them to drop bombs. Now they've been advanced into being used as kamikaze drones. Now they have developed their own drone technology to be able to fight, to be able to fly longer distances. When you start talking about federal and states being able, and even cities and municipalities being able to fight drone technology, most people aren't looking at the Z angle yet. Everyone's looking at XY. They're not looking at what can be coming from the top. And when you're not thinking about what comes from the top, you're not developing any kind of technology to be able to stop that. We had this, Jeff and I had this little heated conversation about this last time we were talking about drone tech. At some point, you have to create a legislation of what kind of technology can be purchased off the shelf, how it's controlled, how it's registered, how it's used, what kind of questions can be asked, because now drones are actually a weapon. Before, people used them as hobby devices. But when you start talking about jihadis and sleeper cells, they are using them as weapons. They've been well trained on how to use them as weapons. until the government starts to understand that this is now a weapon, and they start creating legislation and technology and empowering fusion centers and local police and federal officials on how to counter drone tech, you're not going to be able to stop them. And the gap right now is huge.
Yeah, again, no good news from Khalid, huh? Wishful thinking. So
see, the problem, Chris, is we've seen this now. I mean, we've seen it in Pakistan. We've trained our military on this. We've trained our police forces on this. Stopping a drone attack is almost impossible because we don't have the tech to do it.
yeah, it's crazy. We've been covering this for 4.5 years now in Survival Dispatch News, and the situation has improved militarily, but not so much otherwise. All right, Randy, you get to close out segment number 3. I don't think there's any argument that the primary target in this asymmetric warfare against us is civilian society, civilian targets, not really military assets. Is there such a thing as an effective civilian defense? And if so, what do you reckon it looks like, Randy?
Well, we were supposed to have a militia, so I think it would look like our National Guard. However, I don't know that we have that kind of autonomy with those guys, really, that comes through the state unless they're federally activated. I would say that, if something developed, if we had an attack in this country that set us back far enough, or at least made things bad enough that we needed to do that, well, I think that we're all Americans. I still want to believe, even though we all talk about it all the time, that 80 are only targets, right? That I think people will stand up and fight for to keep this from happening in their town or it being further damaged. And what that would look, I think that, that should be, if we go back far enough in time, who was responsible for that? And it was your local sheriffs. I think that, they could deputize folks. I think that probably would be the place to start, because you unless that's not available, but I think that would be the best way to start, because that would also help legitimize it, and in a way that makes it legal, even in unforeseen circumstances. I would say that would be my vote. Otherwise you would have to go, things get bad enough, it could look like Mad Max, right? It'd be city by city, neighborhood by neighborhood. And then it's just basically who's left and who can stand up and fight. And it'll go back to our prehistoric times where, you went and counted every available man to see how many people you had available, and go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. Appreciate it. I was just going to hit the gas a little bit here because we're running a little bit long. So segment number 4, the intelligence gap. What happens when the agencies meant to stop this are gutted? So the FBI's CI-12 counterintelligence unit, the primary team responsible for tracking Iranian operatives on U.S. soil, was gutted days before Operation Epic Fury launched, not for performance reasons, but as political retaliation, removing experienced analysts at the exact moment the threat environment went critical. DHS cannot issue updated National Terrorism Advisory System alerts right now because a Democrat-driven funding shutdown has left the NTAS website unmanaged since February 17th, meaning the American public is operating in an elevated threat environment with no official public threat communication from the agency that was built to provide it. So, shameless plug here, when you sign up as a Survival Dispatch Guardian, in addition to getting access to our private community with 20 channels that is split up by topics, encrypted channels, you also get enrolled in SDN, Survival Dispatch Emergency Notification System. We send emergency SHTF alerts to your email, to our Substack behind the paywall, to our SDN's channel on our private Element server, to POClink radios, the POClink app that's on your smartphone, and our old Signal SDN's channel. And I built a ton of redundancy into it and resiliency. Former network and systems engineer, just for those who don't know. And it's a very robust. And if you're worried about getting SHTF alerts as shit happens, sign up for Survival Dispatch Guardians program. Survivaldispatch.news, $9.99 a month or $99.99 a year. So with that being said, the final point here is the institutional knowledge lost through 2 years of purges, firings, and resignations across the DOJ National Security Division and FBI counterterrorism offices represents an intelligence gap that cannot be rebuilt in weeks. It takes years to develop human source networks, and those networks walk out the door when experienced handlers are forced out. So, Jeff, I got to come back to you just because I always come to you first and foremost, right? When the FBI unit specifically responsible for tracking Iranian operatives on U.S. soil lost key personnel days before Operation Epic Fury, what type of operational gap did that create in your estimation in terms of monitoring active threats and acting on active threats?
Well, the main problem is the loss of continuity. The unit wasn't shut down. The leadership was replaced. But those are the people who know what's going on and know who's in charge and know who's doing what. It's like, if there's a base and and there's a unit at the base, probably the best time to attack them is right when the new guys come in. They rotate. Unit A rotates out, Unit B rotates in. Well, you hit them when Unit B just gets there because they don't know what's going on yet. They just got there. And that's the situation we have with this unit in the FBI. Yeah, people were fired and other people were, moved into those jobs, but they've had those jobs for a minute. They don't, anytime you take over an organization or you assume command of an organization, I've done it when I've become, taken over as a base chief somewhere or something like that. It takes a while to get your feet on the ground and figure out what's going on. And you're usually dependent upon the people who were there before you to kind of fill you in on what's going on. But if they've been canned, there's no turnover process. Now, if they're rotating out, you're rotating in, you hope that there's some overlap or you can meet them to discuss issues and what's going on. But if they get fired and you've got to go in to clean up the mess, yeah, you have no clue what's going on. It's going to take you a while to figure it out. I don't care how good you are.
Yeah, it sounds like the timing definitely not great. So,
yeah,
Mike, how significant is it that DHS, can't currently issue NTAS public alerts? And what does the absence of that public communication channel specifically mean for state and local law enforcement and coordinating those agencies?
Well, it's important because it's really what a lot of people and these agencies are depending on and leaning in on. I think when you have organizations that are just shut down and inoperable and you don't have options, then it's justification for it's political justification for, well, we told you so. We told you what would happen if the Dems shut the government down and we weren't operating on the up and up. It's not our fault. And it's almost like a fault. It could be a potential false flag kind of deal. And it's scary when those things happen because a lot of agencies outside of just people depend on these updates and the interagency communication to have this coordination done, which is why 9/11 happened. The FBI and the CIA weren't getting along, weren't communicating, and for whatever reason, there's many reasons, but for whatever reason, it slipped through the cracks. So if you look at the potential threat environment, it is higher than it's ever been, possibly in the history of our country. It's like right now, right this moment, and it's shut down.
Yeah, just unbelievable. So, Khalid, I want to get your opinion here from a firsthand perspective. So, what's the practical difference between having experienced counterterrorism professionals, that have established these long-term human source networks versus rebuilding from scratch with new hires that have no established intelligence relationships?
Well, the easiest way I can explain it is, do you want a surgeon operating on you who just graduated from medical school, or do you want someone who's been at it for 20 years?
Right.
Because the difference is just clear that way. Someone who's been in the field and understands how a human intelligence network works, how to work as a handler, how to be able to vet and classify intelligence that comes in, because it's not just a collection of intelligence, it's knowing what is real and what isn't real. You're going to hear a lot of things when you're collecting intelligence. You've got to have the ability to understand what is credible and what is just rumor. And when you're new at the game and you're just stepping into that world, you don't know how to deal with your people. You don't know how to vet. You don't know how to classify. So you're literally thrown into a shitstorm. What Kash Patel did right before Operation Epic Fury started in firing 12 very senior Iran specialists from the FBI was absolute stupidity, because you crippled U.S. national security again because you didn't understand the need for those people. Right now, Kash Patel, and this is something we wrote about the other day in our IRGC paper, Kash Patel is looking at 4 kinetic attacks that have happened inside the United States. He's coordinating with MI5 on 20 threats that exist to the UK right now from Iranian sleeper cells. How does someone like Kash Patel, who does not have a background in intelligence, does not have a background in understanding how terrorists operate, decipher all of that into how the threat relates to the United States itself? This has always been our problem with the cabinet and the team that Kash has got, or sorry, that Donald Trump has. Joe Kent, and Tulsi Gabbard are specialists in this field. They are being sidelined because the domestic agencies want to show off more than anything else, and it's weakened the intelligence collection.
Yeah, and we're going to hear from both of them plus Ratcliffe tomorrow. Not that I expect anything to come out of it, but I mean, Mike knows Joe Kent well. They're both Green Berets at the same time. And he knows Tulsi as well, and they're good people, but the system seems to be working against them. So, Randy, you're batting cleanup again. Number one, at the best of times, how much faith do you have in the feds for essentially monitoring and putting a stop to terrorist attacks? And now that that's kind of, been put on hold because of this government shutdown, what do you reckon the chances are that state and local law enforcement can fill that gap?
Well, as you know, I think that we are good enough that if all these agencies and all these people were doing the job that's written to be how it's supposed to be and as it was intended, most of this wouldn't even happen. My confidence in that's what's happening, 0. And I would say that, I go back to it can't be incompetence, because people just wouldn't make it. We wouldn't be this far if everybody was that stupid. It just, so some of this has got to be intentional in my mind. But, when it comes to them stopping right now, I don't think they're doing anything. I mean, we look at the little thing he threw up during Halloween, right? And I think there was one other thing that Patel said that they stopped a terrorist attack or something. But somehow when the real ones come, or even now the last few we had over this weekend that were obviously not professionals, they didn't stop any of those either. So right now I have 0 expectation that the federal agencies are going to stop anything in that respect. And as far as state and local law enforcement, I mean, they're not trained to do this. This wasn't their job. It never has been. And as we just talked about, even our law enforcement never trained that until September 11th. And now we've moved far enough past it that it's gone with the wind. So I really doubt. And then as we all know, and many people in the chat and many people that have come on the show over the last year has said, when you talk to any of the local officials, they're all, there's 0 chance of that happening, or the feds would have told us. So there's no way that the local and state officials will be ready or have the resources and the training to deal with it the way that it should be. So I don't know. It could be a real mess.
Yeah, I think everybody's on the same page here. So pivoting into the 5th and final segment, the community defense imperative, what prepared Americans can do that government can't. The post 9/11 security architecture was built around centralized federal response, and a coordinated multi-city asymmetric attack is specifically designed to overwhelm centralized response capacity, which means the gap between federal mobilization and actual local protection falls to the community itself. Schools, churches, and neighborhood gathering points are the highest value soft targets in any asymmetric attack scenario, and the congregations and communities that have pre-established security protocols, communication trees, and trained volunteers will be the ones who survive the first wave while emergency services are still being routed. Situational awareness at the local level is the earliest warning system that exists. The Austin attack, the Michigan synagogue attack, and the Virginia University attack all unfolded in environments where community members were the first to respond. And in at least one case, ROTC students subdued the attacker and saved lives before law enforcement arrived. So I got to go to Mike first on this one because this is his wheelhouse. Mike, describe what genuine community level preparedness looks like for the types of unconventional threats that we're discussing. And I got to put a plug in for Mike as well. If you haven't bought his book Prepared and you haven't read it and you're serious about being prepared, you owe it to yourself to do so. I'm going to put a link to it on Amazon, the live chat while Mike's talking. But Mike, what's actual civilian preparedness look like?
I think it's mobilization of executing your plan that you talk about at the dinner table, or, have a formal organized meet with your neighbors on. A lot of people talk hypotheticals in community planning because it's all theory until you execute it, right? And so very few communities across the United States have had to put these plans into execution. But it's not just natural catastrophes. We need to be paying more attention to these man-made catastrophes that potentially will happen because there's power in numbers in organization. If you think you're going to survive a terrorist attack on your own that displaces you, especially, you're mistaken. You're going to have to lean in on neighbors, and you don't want to do that hastily. So I think it's having a plan, having rehearsals of that plan, and the success metric is actually executing that plan under those pressures of stress and duress and getting it done. Look, I don't think, mobilizing a small unit tactics team to go kill the bad guys is what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about like mobilizing the families to rendezvous to have the conversation on the next plans or next steps in your contingency. So if you come together and you're like, okay, so what do we do now? That's probably the wrong question. You could have formulated that plan, the contingencies for that plan, all before it actually happened. And that's success, in my opinion.
Thank you for that insight. I appreciate that. So, Jeff, how should schools, churches, community organizations think about security posture in this elevated environment? And what are the bare minimum elements of practical security protocol for these soft targets?
Yeah, with schools, you would hope that your area has school resource officers. They may or may not. They may be off-duty police officers that as soon as something hits the fan, they're not off duty anymore. So they may get called up to do other things. And the local community, you need to have almost like a sheriff's posse mentality where they have people they can call to say, okay, the school resource officer is going full-time cop now. We need people to have a presence at the school. Same with your church or any place like that. You need to have, you can have a visible presence where you make yourself look like not a soft target. And sadly, they may just go to the next church, but you want to be able to respond. And if you look at what happened in Michigan, when the guy, ran the car into the synagogue, he didn't get very far because they had armed security. And if the ROTC, the same thing is they weren't armed, but they fought back, and that they killed one guy, sadly, but it could have been a lot worse. But you had people who were prepared to take action. And as citizens, when this happens, you can't count on the police to, they're not going to be cruising your neighborhood looking for bad guys. They're going to have their hands full. So what you're going to have to do that they can't do is defend yourself, defend your neighbors, defend your neighborhood.
You mean you shouldn't run, duck, and hide? That's not
only if they're throwing hand grenades.
Fair enough. Khalid, if the feds, their capacity is degraded and local law enforcement is, overwhelmed, like Jeff just mentioned, what communication infrastructure should prepared families and neighborhoods have in place right now?
Well, start with the basic stuff. I mean, you have to assume that your mobile networks are going to be down. So walkie-talkies. I'm a big fan of flags and flashlights because it's very easy to work with those without anyone knowing what you're signaling, because they're not expecting a flag or a flashlight to be used as a communication tool during an attack of this kind. Communities have to understand that the more you plan right now, the more successful you're going to be. These are not things you can do on the run. And the amount of information out there, and you can do a lot of this as situational preparedness. Sit down and look at some of the attacks that have been carried out on schools in the Middle East, schools in Europe, hospitals in Europe, grid stations in Europe, and get an idea of how the attack was carried out, and then figure out how you would work against that. The communication part of this is the most difficult part, because you're going to have so many people going, well, that's not going to work. Someone has to step up and be a leader and write the code book, and this is how the communication system is going to run once SHTF happens. If you don't get someone who can do that, you're going to be swinging in the wind trying to figure out how to talk to each other, because too many people think, I've got a mobile phone, that'll work. I've got a walkie-talkie, that'll work. That's putting all your eggs in one basket, and you're going to lose that way. And communication is the only way you're going to be able to secure your own neighborhoods.
I saw somebody recently, Khalid, who's a supposed SME, do this comms plan, and it was all based on the person's cell phone. There's, I don't know, that's game over. That's your cell phone's not a comms plan, to say the least. Randy, again, batting cleanup here. What's the most important mind shift Americans need to make to move from being passive observers of this threat environment to active participants in their own defense?
Yeah. So, well, I wanted to answer a question. Look, I tried to type it in the deal, but I guess YouTube blocked it. Somebody had asked. So my email's randy@survivaldispatch.com. Randy@survivaldispatch.com. I don't remember who it was. Anyway, so now I forgot the question, Chris. How about that? Jeez.
What's the single most important
That's right.
Americans need to make?
Well, what you're really going to have to decide is this is really happening, because some may still want to deny themselves even looking at it, that this is happening. But I'm going to go back to the one I always use. It's the same thing for SF or any special operations. It's just having the never quit attitude, that no matter what happens, shorting of you getting killed, obviously, because you can't do anything if you're dead. But that mindset of no matter what happens, you're going to finish what you're doing or get to where you're going, or you're going to complete the mission successfully, no matter what. And that's what you have to have in the tougher times, right? And when things are real tough, and when things are not normal. And certainly if we had some sort of attack like what we're talking about, that would be something the Americans haven't seen in this country since the Civil War. And, so none of us, most civilians are not ready for that. And you need to have that mindset, because if you fall apart and start crying and freaking out and getting scared, well, you're going to be one of those 80 targets. But the reality is, don't stop no matter what happens. You have to have that mindset. It doesn't matter if they cut. Oh, hey, let's go to remember the Holy Grail, where the dude's fighting and he cuts his arm off. And the guy says, "Oh, let's keep going." He goes, "No, you have to quit." He's like, "No, it's just a flesh wound." He cuts the other one. He keeps going till there's nothing left of the guy. That's how you have to be. You have to have that mindset that even if they cut your leg or arm off, you are not going to stop no matter what.
Well, Jeff and Mike can attest to the fact that, again, our good friend Don Mann, one of his favorite sayings is, it's really hard to stop a guy who doesn't quit. And that describes Don Mann to a T. So, Randy, it's that time. We're getting ready to wrap up with the Carnival practical payoff. 3, 2, 1. So the practical payoff is our panel weighing in on either a skill, an item, or a mindset shift related to tonight's topic and what y'all in the audience can and should do. Mike, I'm going to go to you first. What's a skill that everybody should acquire if they don't already have it, or an item or a mind shift I was going to say in your mind, but that's like a double entendre. But pick one of the three: skill, item, mindset shift based on tonight's topic for the audience.
I'll just default to what I always do, because I think it's important, especially with the threat emerging, and that's shoot, move, communicate. A lot of people always think self-defense is the 2 a.m. gas station mugging. It's not that. I mean, it is that, but that's very separate from what we're talking about. We're talking about men who are willing to die for their cause and will inflict as many casualties until they're martyred. That is a very different ideology than law enforcement is used to, than civilians are used to. And so we're playing pretend if we think that we're going to have the capability to fight that adversary without having the skill set to shoot, move, and communicate, to flank maneuver, to set a support by fire position, to use cover, to individually move to cover and concealment, to set out and do barricades and shoot in modified positions using that cover. All of those things are not taught in EDC and practical training and self-defense. It's draw the pistol sub-second on a target 7 meters in front of you. That's great. You'll just die that way, especially if you're not thinking outside the box. And then lastly, the part of that that's important is we use the word extending or upgrading your level of capability. Your 38 or 357 Ruger LCR, beautiful gun, 5 rounds in a synthetic frame, no hammer, could be shot from a jacket. That's not going to save your life against a jihadist who is armored up with an AK-47, a drone package, and his buddy.
Yeah, true story. So tell the truth, Mike. How much Wasatch Wagyu did you eat today?
You know, it's so funny is I'm rebuilding, like I have a go room, like a safe room in my house that has a whole bunch of crap. And I was unloading 72-hour go bags, and I dumped a bag, and I had 10. Now I only have 3, but I had 10 of the deal Wasatch Wagyu rubber banded in a pack, and I dumped it. And about midnight last night, I remembered that I dumped it and came downstairs in the dark and found it with a headlamp and got into it. There's 3 left.
This is the best jerky in the world. WasatchWagyu.com. It's Greg's own cattle. Look at the high fat contents, good fat. Won't break your jaw. Mike and I are both in group therapy for our addiction to this crack cocaine, But and if any of y'all in the audience need the group therapy as well, we have a discount for that. But the discount code for this stuff is SD2020. Get 20% off there. Jeff, your choice: item, skill, or mindset shift based on tonight's topic.
Well, it's kind of a cross between a skill and a mindset shift. You're going to have, when it comes to your neighborhood, you may have to organize your neighbors. Don't count on them to organize themselves. So you may have to step in and take charge. And that means you're dealing with people, dealing with egos, including your own. If you have a neighbor who is better at something than you are, defer to that person, because all because you're the leader. If you become the leader, doesn't mean you have to have all the answers to everything. A lot of being a leader is knowing when to delegate and who to delegate to. So if you're setting up a defense of your neighborhood, you've got to be realistic in your assessment of your neighbors. Who's good at what, who's not good at what. And then there's some diplomacy there that you can say, okay, Bill, buddy, I love you, but you can't hit the broadside of a barn with a gun. I don't want you in the sniper overwatch position because you can't shoot anything.
Yeah, hated his politics, but I adopted one of Steve Jobs' practices years ago. He said, truly good leaders hire people that are better at things than the leader is themselves, and then get the heck out of the way and let them do their thing.
Yeah.
And it's good advice, regardless of his politics. By the way, don't go anywhere. Jeff, Randy, and and Mike are going to be leaving, but Khalid and I will be hanging on for a sit rep. You're going to get all kinds of information of goings on in the Middle East firsthand from Khalid when we get into that. Randy, take your pick. Item, mindset shift, or skill.
Well, I'm going to do a blend of two because I'm going to recommend something I've recommended multiple times on this show, certainly in light of Mike's and Jeff's, both their comments. Go out and get you a Ranger handbook. If you've never been in the military, and if you were in the military and you weren't in the infantry, go find a Ranger handbook. It'll teach you a lot, and not just about infantry tactics, but yes, some of the best infantry tactics are in that book, and it will teach you how to shoot, move, and communicate if you don't already know, and most people do not. The other thing is I'm going to go back to it's got to be another mind shift, right? It's the same one I've said many times on here before, man. If things are out of your control and you can't do anything about it, there's no sense in getting upset. There's no sense in getting mad or crying or pissing and moaning or doing any of that. If things are outside of your control, just let it go and do what comes next. Do the very next step. There's always a next step, no matter what situation you're in. There is always that next step and then the step after. And it's how we get out of a hole, right? Is one step at a time. But it goes to the same mindset I have, just like never giving up. But there's also times where you have to be able to turn on a dime and let that stuff roll off your back. And that's how you do it. Is there's nothing I can do about this. I'm going to take the next step. Because even though whatever you're talking about, there's nothing in your control, that next step is. So take it.
There you go. One foot in front of the other. Khalid, final word, skill, item, or mindset shift?
I'm going to give you a mindset shift. You have alarm bells going off everywhere, not just around you in your neighborhood, but your governments, foreign countries, terrorists are all saying they're going to hit you. Take them at their word and stop thinking it's not going to happen. Because the more you think it's not going to happen, or my police force is prepared for this, or my military will deploy to protect me, go back to 9/11 and remember what happened on that day and what happened in New York City and how long it took for New York City to come back to peace. If you don't remember that, look at 7/7 when London was attacked. If you don't look at that, look at October 7th when Israel was attacked. Coming back to normal is very difficult from when you get attacked. But the people that were successful were the ones that, one, had prepared themselves, two, were mentally ready for what was coming. And I use this phrase in a lot of my conversations. At this point, you should be able to feel the jihadi's breath on the back of your neck. That's how close we are to an attack. And as long as you keep saying, well, no, it's nothing, it's nothing, it's nothing, you're going to get hit, and you're going to get hit much harder, and you're going to suffer yourselves. So even if your next door neighbor isn't ready to prepare, even if your neighborhood community is not ready to organize, at least organize the people that are ready to move, because that's your protection. You don't need to worry about everybody else. You need to worry about the people that want to continue living. Step by step, move through it. Don't panic. But again, you lose the panic option when you prepare. So that's the mindset shift I'd give you.
Awesome stuff. All right, Jeff, Randy, Mike, appreciate your time very, very much. And we'll see you all in a couple days. Again, Khalid and I are going to get into a extended sit rep. Thanks, guys.
Yep. Thank you, guys. See you.
Hey, guys.
All right. Let me get us over to another stage here, Khalid. Get you up on this stage. There we go. All right. So I think what we need to start with, Khalid, is your general sit rep to set the stage before we pull up any X posts at all. So the stage is yours.
Okay. Let me take you through what we've been doing over the past few days. If you've been watching the Survival Dispatch website, if you've been watching the Command 11 website, if you've been watching our X accounts, we have been delving very heavily into the Irani threat. Now, Command 11 on the Dead Drop Intel website, we put up a very comprehensive review of an attack that was carried out by the IRGC in Washington, D.C. on a Saudi ambassador and what lessons they learned from that and how they diversified their attack strategy. Coupled with that are 3 more papers that we put out on the Command 11 website that I would recommend everyone reads because they're very important. it gives you an understanding of how long the IRGC has been planning to attack the US and on what level they've been planning to attack. They are not thinking of how they can use their own resources to attack you. This is not Iranis coming to get you. This is Iranis that have been well placed inside the United States, inside of Mexico, inside of Venezuela, in the tri-border area in Latin America, that are going to orchestrate an attack inside the United States. That's very key to understand. Secondly, a lot of Iranis, there's been a video that's gone out from the IRGC very recently, and I would say probably in the last couple of hours, where they have asked trained Iranis, that's a very key statement, trained Iranis to leave the Western world and come back and defend Iran. That is something that the IRGC has never done. What that is an admission of a significant loss of military-aged males that can come and defend their country. It's an understanding that they are now in a very precarious situation where they could see Iran collapse completely. So they are asking military-aged males that are Irani by birth to come back and fight for Iran. Couple that with what Pakistan is doing right now. And I keep bringing this up because a lot of people are not paying attention to the damage that Pakistan is doing to the Taliban. Tonight, we hit 7 targets inside of Afghanistan. We blasted Kabul. And you're seeing on X, there's a lot of people talking about how we hit a drug rehab hospital. I will give you firsthand information. The location they're saying was a drug rehab hospital I have been to personally. I have seen it. It is a Taliban intelligence center. The Taliban is doing exactly what terror groups say. Oh, you hit a hospital. Oh, you hit an ambulance. Oh, you hit civilians. That's not true. And no one is, if you go and check our Command 11 handle, we have geolocation proof that that's a Taliban intelligence center that's being branded as a drug rehab hospital. What was it? I think it was General. Which general was it? It was before Mills. We actually have proof of a U.S. general visiting that while it was a command center, while it was a combined forces command center. So how does a combined forces command center all of a sudden become a drug rehab hospital? Keep your eyes on what's going on in Taliban land, because we are after them. We know the more we hit, the more we pressure them, the more that regime takes a lot of trouble. That means that the potential of the 9/11 homeland attack, the way it was mapped out to begin with, decreases down to more specific attacks as compared to a coordinated attack. That does not change the way the IRGC is going to attack, though. The IRGC is set up in a way that they can run a coordinated terror attack and run it on multiple cities because they built their cells and they understand that they can carry it out the way they want to, because they've proven it, they've tested it. They paid $1.5 million to a drug cartel in 2011 to kill a Saudi ambassador. $1.5 million. The drug cartels, if you read the papers we put out, the drug cartels are generating in the billions for the IRGC. You think that relationship isn't working? You think those guys are not going to look to hit the U.S. right now? The problem we have in the United States is DHS is shut down. Your national security funding is stopped because the Democrats have created an environment now that what they weren't able to do with their socialist agenda, they're going to try and do with the jihadi agenda. Does that mean that a false flag can be carried out? Yes, it does. Does that mean that you as a citizen need to be more prepared? Yes, it does. Because again, I'm going to say it the same way I said it before. You should be able to feed the jihadis breath on the back of your neck. That's how close we are right now. That is literally how close we are right now. And as things escalate in Iran, as Donald Trump continues to push Iran and starts to think about moving ground forces into Iran, the threat to the U.S. homeland becomes much, much more significant and more serious from the IRGC.
Yeah, thanks, Cleve. Let me get us over on another screen here so you can talk about the series of articles. Let me get you up on stage here. There we go. All right, so this is on the Command 11 website, and I'll put the URL in the chat in just a second. So Khalid, with very little input from me, he doesn't need my input on a lot of this stuff, has written this awesome series that starts right there.
Not
So
go down one more.
one more. Oh,
Yep.
yeah,
Starts there.
yeah. Walk us through each of these ones at a high level, and then I highly recommend that you all go read them.
Okay, so the Iranian bomb plot is what we're talking about with in 2011, a Iranian national was approached by the IRGC to work as a second tier handler to coordinate with the cartels to kill the Saudi ambassador in Washington, D.C. $1.5 million was paid. They literally ran a complete test scenario on how the IRGC could work with the cartel, move money, move weapons, and carry out attack on the homeland. They learned a lot from this, and reading this entire report that we wrote will give you a lot of understanding on what the IRGC knows and how they're able to move now. That is very key for what we're looking at in terms of the attack from the IRGC in the US. The next article that we did was talking about how their network is built inside of the mosques, inside of the radicalization system. Because look, a lot of people, if you looked at all the riots that happened, all the protests that happened, those were all Hamas operatives. All of them have now been brainwashed into believing that Hamas and Hezbollah are freedom fighters. That is the worst thing that could have happened for the homeland. Because it's like getting people to believe, it's like getting people go out and protest for Al Qaeda, saying they're freedom fighters, they're fighting to overthrow the monarchies in the Gulf states. That's not what they are. You have literally rebranded them using the same mentality they used to indoctrinate people. And we're working on the indoctrination series with you, Chris, which is another 5-part series, the Mosque to Battlefield series, where we're explaining to people exactly how a normal person, and I mean a normal person just like you and me, can be slowly, over a period of 6 weeks, and 6 weeks, we can go from being a normal person to being a lone wolf attacker for the Islamic State or for Al Qaeda. 6 weeks. And if you're already disenfranchised with the way things are happening, if we look at Antifa, we look at the protesters that are out, they're taking socialist money, they're already disenfranchised. It takes 3 weeks to turn them into radical jihadis. 3 weeks. So the base that's being built that can now be leveraged by IRGC and the cartels is huge. And the problem we've got is the FBI doesn't even know how to track these people, because until a lone wolf takes a step, you don't know he's a potential attacker. So this is a huge gap for law enforcement. And there's a lot of people talking about how this can be stopped, but you'll never find a lone wolf attacker because they never show. They never show their intention outside. And a lot of people say, well, they post things online and they act a certain way. No, they don't. Part of their training is to act normal and think jihadi. Act normal and think jihadi until the time you're ready to carry out the attack. That's something that people need to understand. The next article in the series is the IRGC in the Middle East. And we went through and we broke down how the IRGC was pre-Operation Epic Fury and how it's been restructured right now. The key in this study is understanding that the IRGC in 2001 turned into a decentralized intelligence agency. That means that instead of having one chain of command that runs from, like, for example, the CIA runs, you have 31 different commanders spread across the world that are completely independent from the IRGC. They can make decisions on their own. They receive funding and they can do whatever they want to do to advance the Iranian cause. Once you understand that, it changes the way you think about the Iranian sleeper cells that are sitting around the United States. Because when you've got a command and control center that's going to have a green light, that's very different than 31 people saying, okay, we've given you a set of conditions. And this is the key to the Iranian sleeper cell attack. They're not waiting for a green light from Iran. They're waiting for 3 or 4 conditions to be fulfilled, and they are automatically greenlit. They're automatically activated, and they carry out their attack based on that. So even what you're looking at inside the United States, they will not show themselves until the attack starts. And once the attack starts, it's impossible to stop because it will roll very quickly. The other thing that's not in the articles and something that I want people to know, we saw a report that came out today from CISA that said the U.S. in the past week has suffered the most cyber attacks they have ever seen in 1 year, and all of them have been traced back to Iran. That's not just testing. They are looking at where they can hit you and how they can hit you. That means they are looking to couple a cyber attack with a kinetic attack with a infrastructure attack. When you look at the IRGC in Latin America, that will bring you to the level of understanding how the cartels are working with the Iranian intelligence service. This is where the pieces start to fit. And this is the third key piece of the entire article. When you move up to the last article, the SSCI article, it's what we expect to be discussed. And the hearing that was supposed to happen tomorrow, the intelligence hearing that was supposed to be handled tomorrow, has been postponed.
It has.
And it's very interesting that it's been postponed, because if you read what we expected to be discussed in that intelligence hearing, it was all about Iran. And the focus would have been on Kash Patel, not so much on the CIA, not so much on Tulsi Gabbard, but on Kash Patel, because again, 4 kinetic attacks in the United States, 20 known planned attacks in London that MI5 is watching. Kash Patel was going to be questioned very heavily on the preparedness of the FBI to handle an attack on the United States from the Iranian sleeper cells. The fact that this has been postponed is, I think that Kash said, listen, I'm not ready for the questions that are going to come. So let's postpone this. Let me get my ducks in a row before I get on in front of the panel and start asking questions, because the FBI is greatly unprepared for what's about to happen. If you roll back one article, this is something that we have been looking at for quite a while, the Millennium Challenge. In 2001, the U.S. military paid $250 million to carry out a simulated war game on a country like Iran. The commander of the Iranian, the Red Team, used exactly the techniques that Iran is using right now. It took him 2 hours to decimate the Fifth Fleet. 2 hours, and he wiped out the entire Fifth Fleet. The U.S. military then turned around and said, whoa, stop. They then handcuffed the commander on that was running the Red Team and said, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. So they were able to show that the U.S. military was ready for an attack, a war against Iran, when they actually weren't. And when you read how the entire thing breaks down and how it was carried out, you start to wonder whether the military is actually prepared for a sleeper cell attack inside the United States. Because for a military to stop a war game and say, wait, no, wait, we need to handcuff the enemy. You don't get to decide what tactics the enemy is going to use against you. That's an open book for them. And there's absolutely no doubt in our minds that the Iranians looked at that war game and said, wait a minute, there's a lot we can learn from this. And if you look at what they're doing 25 years later, it's exactly what that Marine Corps commander did to the U.S. military when he was running the Red Team. So there's a lot of learning that we put out in the past 4 days from Command 11. It's all built to give you an understanding, to build more security for yourselves and build more understanding of what the government is not telling you, what the government is actually ready for.
Yeah, appreciate that extended description, Khalid. So let's get into the next phase of our sit rep tonight. Listen to this one. This is genius. Iranians playing the sound of drones, so Baji's forces get scared and flee. 16 seconds. So, I mean, we've been talking drones quite a bit lately, and how you can hide from thermal cameras with simple umbrellas. But that's an interesting concept right there, because typically you can't hear a drone until it's within at least 200 yards, sometimes as little as 100 yards before you'll hear that buzzing. Khalid, talk to me about that tactic there.
Well, it's a great tactic because look, when you can play with someone's mind on the battlefield, you greatly change their capabilities. When you start using, and this is why we like cognitive warfare and asymmetric warfare, because it is a game that you're playing in that 2x2 space inside of someone's mind, and you can make someone react by the way you run. Using speakers in a mosque, using a sound system of some kind to create a drone sound, or a missile flying overhead, or an explosion someplace, you will change the way that the people think, and you'll change the way the ground forces operate. It is something that people have not figured out yet. The concept of being able to use trickery to change the battlefield is a great way to control your own use of resources and mess with your enemy's mind.
Yeah, it's awesome. So going from, a fake tactic to actual kinetic stuff here. The IRGC Aerospace Force conducted one of its largest drone strikes on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, the capital city of Iraq. The CRAM short-range air defense system protecting the compound successfully shot down most of the one-way attack drones launched from Iran towards the ministry or the embassy building, pardon me. These exceptional videos show how the CRAM system successfully intercepted the incoming drones. So the CRAM is the land-based version of the CWIZ, which is on almost every Navy ship out there. It's a badass piece of technology. Check this out. So it kind of sounds like an A-10 Warthog, but it's essentially a radar dome that the cyclic rate is ridiculous. So I want to say it's over 3,000 rounds per second.
It is.
I'll go ahead and stop it there. It's just stuff dropping. So when Randy went back, Randy was in a program. I don't recall if I told you this or not, Khalid, but when he got hit with that EFP, it was in Iraq in 2006. Then he ended up at SOCOM on the other side of the state here in Tampa. And somebody came along and funded this program where our troops that had been carried off the battlefield could go back to the front lines and engage the enemy. Best thing that's ever happened for many of them from a PTSD perspective. So by 2017, of course, Iraq was over. So they sent him to Afghanistan. He got to shoot the CRAM and he took down 3 missiles. I've got a video of it that's badass because you can hear him light it up, makes this whole warm-up sound, and off it goes. And you can see it hitting the missiles in the sky, incoming missiles, and then, or they're probably rockets for that matter. But you see it hit them visually, but you don't hear the sound because of the time it took for the sound to travel. It was pretty badass. I can tell you that Randy came back a new man after that episode or adventure. So check this out from our friends at Blue Lives Matter. This is my buddy Kyle, who's one of the people who always keeps getting us invited back to Mar-a-Lago. Urgent alert to a bunch of people like Tulsi Gabbard. U.S. TikToker Ethan Levin has been caught giving Iran coordinates to hit American Patriot systems in Israel, aiding enemies to strike U.S. targets abroad is treason. Let's check this out.
Urgent message for the Iranian government right here. I need missiles here tonight. Israel's Channel 12 did a report on the new Patriot battery system. It's right here at the Palashamin Air Force Base. It's actually right here. You can zoom out a little bit, Iran, if you want to see that. Yet again, it's this exact area. I'm going to zoom out for you. This is where the Patriot battery system is. This is the guy that reported it. He's Channel 13. Actually, you can see it right here about the Aero battery air defense he's posting with it. That is going to be right here. It's right there in the middle. Yet again, here's another photo he posted confirming. Look how the sides are like a wall. It opens up just like right here. It's brand new, by the way, Iran. So if you want to fire off a few missiles that way, there's only 6 interceptors in this direction. So you're going to need about 8. You're going to need a bigger barrage than normal. So what I'm assuming, guys, is we fire at Tel Aviv, divert it south, and maybe you can even get some interceptions over here just to waste some more. Make sure to like the video, repost, share with all your Iranian friends. Let's see if we can.
All right. So let's
What an
keep
absolute idiot.
Yeah, let's keep our commentary to the level that doesn't get us thrown off a bunch of platforms again, but roll with that one, Clede. That is unreal.
Look, I don't understand how you can aid the enemy and not expect to be BFE'd. I'll put it that way. Because when you start sharing locations of troops, start sharing locations of your own forces, you are a traitor to your own country. Period. End of story. We reported a guy the other day who was, boasting about how the Taliban should hit more targets inside of Pakistan. He was posting coordinates. He was based in Alberta, Canada. We reported it to the Alberta Sheriff's Department and to various police forces in Alberta, and said, "Look, you've got a Taliban supporter who is literally sharing targets of Pakistani military locations. You need to solve this problem." And Elon has been turning off X accounts that have been caught sharing locations. But as soon as you turn it off, they've already got a second one set up. They've got a third one set up, and they're funneling that information. There's also a WhatsApp group. This is something most people don't know. There's a WhatsApp group that people are literally sharing exact coordinates of U.S. forces, U.S. military with the Iranian army. I don't understand how the U.S. is not tracking WhatsApp. I mean, WhatsApp is a CIA tool. Everyone knows it is. How are you not tracking these people and figuring out who's sharing these locations and arresting them straight away? You are responsible for the death of American soldiers. You are responsible for American soldiers being injured. How is the U.S. not doing anything about it? And we know these are all U.S. accounts. We've already hacked into the group. We've identified a bunch of them, but I still don't understand why the U.S. hasn't done anything about it.
I don't have any answers for you, Clede. Let's look at a couple more things coming out of the area. Egypt reports indicated drone strike targeted the Mossad headquarters and a CIA building in northern Cairo amid tight secrecy from Egyptian authorities.
No, بس حريقة ضخمة جدا. حريقة في مدينة ضخمة جدا. Oh my God.
So I'm going to go ahead and stop it there and just ask you, Khalid, how truly diminished is the IRGC? Because they still seem to be slinging lots of kinetic stuff around the area.
Well, the IRGC, the misconception most people have is that the IRGC has been defeated. Let's understand what the objectives were. You want to depose it. You wanted to decapitate the regime. That didn't work. You wanted to weaken the military, which you have done to a certain extent. But you have not been able to stop the drone capabilities. You have not been able to stop the long-range missiles because Iran, knowing that what kind of attack would hit them, had built underground launch centers inside of mountains where they could roll out a launcher, fire, and put the launcher back inside the mountain, and you wouldn't be able to target it. You would literally need ground forces to go in and take those launchers out. And what Iran is rolling out right now, the type of missiles they're using right now with cluster warheads that are hitting Tel Aviv, that are hitting Haifa, the amount of damage they're doing inside of Israel is something that no one expected. We all expected Iran to be knocked out in maybe a week at the most, but that's what we all expected with the way the U.S. came in. Because again, U.S. always attacks with a shock and awe perspective. They come in, they bomb the hell out of you, they take out all your military targets. You were looking at this from the point of view of a conventional military. The IRGC is not a conventional military. They have decentralized. They did that after the Iraq war. After Iraq, they said, wait a minute, we cannot run with a central structure. We need to break this up. We need to move all of our weapons. We need to make sure that everything's secure because Israel wants to hit us. The U.S. wants to hit us. A lot of people have asked the question, why is Saudi Arabia, why is the UAE, why are these countries not responding? They are in that neighborhood. That's the thing people need to understand. When you live in that neighborhood, it's very difficult to launch an attack against a neighbor because you're right there. You can't pack up and leave. The U.S. once the mission is done will pack up all their military and move back to the U.S. But what does the UAE do? What does Saudi Arabia do? What does Qatar do? What does Kuwait do? They can't pack up their country and leave. So they have to work from a different point of view. And what we're hearing right now is Saudi Arabia's Prince Salman is literally telling the U.S. hit Iran harder, hit them harder, because Saudi cannot fire back because they're right there. They're cornered between Yemen and Iran. They cannot fire back even though they have U.S. weaponry. They have the ability to respond. But if they do, they're right there in the neighborhood. And when you look at Pakistan and Afghanistan, Pakistan was a partner with the U.S. in the war on terror. We fought alongside U.S. soldiers against the Taliban. Look at what happened to Pakistan after the U.S. pulled out. We became an open terror target. That is what all of these countries in the Gulf are worried about, that if we fight alongside the U.S. or if we return fire, we can't move. That means we're going to continue to be attacked by Iran unless you can actually decapitate them. And decapitating the Iranian regime is very difficult.
Yeah, it sure seems to be that way. And I have no idea if this is true or not. I don't know if this news force is a legit X account or anything, but they're claiming that Iran finally fires its dancing missile. After years of parading it through military shows and propaganda videos, Iran has finally used the Sigil-2 ballistic missile in combat. Solid fuel weapon can launch quickly and maneuver mid-flight. Features that make missile defense systems work a lot harder than they like. Range around 2,000 kilometers to 1,200 miles. Message is fairly blunt that missile Iran kept showing off wasn't just for the parade route. I don't know if this is real or not. Khalid, let me
It's not. It's not. The dancing missile doesn't exist.
Okay. All right. Good. I figured you'd have some insight on it, so we can move on to the next one. This is pretty crazy. IRGC Police Chief Radon is openly ordering the Basij to the streets tomorrow night on, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that word that's got like 10 syllables, to suppress, shoot, and murder unarmed Iranians gathering to celebrate the ancient Iranian festival of fire. What do you make of this? Like, this doesn't look like Iran's been shut down when this is happening. I mean, they're still murdering Iranians in the street, essentially.
Again, Chris, you have to understand the Iranian structure. You have the IRGC, you have the Iranian army, you have the Bajis. The Bajis are a paramilitary force that answers directly to the IRGC. They don't even answer to the Iranian army. They are distributed in communities, like there are people like you and me that live normal lives. And when the IRGC says activate, you activate. And you come out on the streets and you start firing on people, you start killing people, you start arresting people. That's their job. So when the police chief starts telling people that we want the Basti on the street tomorrow, the intent is to kill. And if you remember, I said this in the last episode too, the Iranian police has openly warned Iranian citizens that if you come out and protest against the regime, we will shoot you on sight. That is a direct quote from from an Iranian police chief. The mentality in Iran right now is, we know the country is about to fall. We know the regime is about to fall. So if we have to kill our own people to keep ourselves in power, we will do that. And it's something that dictatorial madmen states do. Saddam did it with his own people. Gaddafi did it with his own people. When they realize that they're going to lose power, killing their own doesn't matter. And that's what we're seeing in Iran right now, is if they need to. And one of the things that makes this possible is a facial recognition system called Find Face that was given to them by the Russian military. That allows them to identify everyone who is anti-regime and know exactly where they are, where they're moving, where they live, and target them in their homes. So they have a lot of tools and abilities that most people in the West don't understand, because in the West, you're not looking at Iran as a country that is a formalized military. You're looking at it as a country that's under control of a mullah regime. That mullah regime is continually working on how to sustain themselves, which means they have paramilitaries. They have an intelligence service that is spying on their own people. And we've been inside of Iran a number of times. We've got contacts inside the IRGC. There is a coup inside the IRGC right now as well, where people are trying to overthrow the leadership of the IRGC. One of the advantages you have right now is that the supreme leader, the new supreme leader that they put in place, Khamenei's son, is in the hospital. He is most likely in a coma, and he's most likely lost a limb. We don't know which limb he's lost yet, but we know he's lost a limb. As long as he cannot show himself and address the people, that sense of control does not exist.
Interesting. Well, I want to hear you take a run at this one. And let me play part of the video. Iran's regime used heavy machine guns and chemical weapons against its own people, killing over 50,000 in less than 2 days. Can't pronounce the person's name. On how the brutal disregard for human life is a stark warning of what such regimes are capable of on a global scale.
The thing that they did to their own people a month ago, there were a massacre happening in Iran. They killed thousands of people. They killed over 50,000 people in less than 2 days in a street.
Is that true, Clede?
No, it's not true. It's not 50,000. The numbers in the thousands, but it's not 50,000.
Okay.
With heavy military machine gun and snipers, like in buildings, and chemical weapons, people with...
Any truth to the chemical weapons piece, Khalid?
Yeah, they do have chemical weapons. They do have chemical weapons.
Nice.
Bare hands. Like, people are literally bare hands in the street. They don't have gun. Like, this is the American people. They can buy a gun anytime, anywhere. But this is not the same situation.
Well, not here in New Jersey, but we'll let that go.
Well, yes, but as a case, just saying that they can have access to gun, but in Iran they don't. People cannot carry gun, but they were bare hands, and they came with military heavy machine gun to the street, and they killed like 50,000. This is a correct number, and 50,000 people in less than 2 days. Just imagine this regime, what can they do to the whole world? They don't care.
I don't know about that. I mean, thoughts on
let me put some truth to this, because we actually know what happened. What Iran did during the anti-regime protests was they put their military on the streets, they put the bastis in play, and they did go out and execute a number of people. The number is in the thousands. Okay. It's not five. It's not in the tens of thousands. The number we have heard from people inside the IRGC is 5,000 to 6,000 people they've killed. Okay. The number of people injured is in the tens of thousands. Yes, the number of people injured is in the tens of thousands. But the number dead is 5 to 6 to 7,000 people. That's the number we've heard from inside the IRGC. Now, in terms of chemical weapons, if you remember, the U.S. gave Iraq chemical weapons when the Iraq-Iran war was going on. When Saddam's regime fell, where did those chemical weapons go? Over to Iran.
That makes sense.
And I'll tell you why. The Shia leader of the Kitab Hezbollah in Iraq is the defense minister. So okay. you have a pro-Irani operative literally running the defense ministry of Iraq right now.
Fair enough. I got two. Let me play the two back to back, and then you tell the truth of what's going on here. So this account says the Pakistani military regime is using Israeli-style tactics in its aggression and attacks against Afghans, targeting hospitals and civilian places to create fear and terror. All right, so there's not much more to see there. And then let's go over to Pakistan Strategic Forum. I have no idea in the credibility of any of these people, but Pakistan has released footage of airstrikes carried out in Kabul and Nangarhar against terror infrastructure, weapon storage facilities, Taliban terror headquarters. Footage further proves that no so-called rehab center was struck and no Taliban drug addicts were targeted. Operation Ghazab Lil Hack, best I could do, Clete, will continue. Government of Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Let me just show a piece of this, Khalid, and then let her rep.
This is a drone strike.
Okay.
That was a great strike. Just if you notice, we don't post videos. If you've noticed, Command 11 never posts videos of strikes.
Because
this account you're showing right now, Pakistan Strategic Forum, is directly
Mhm.
connected with Pakistan's PR department, Pakistan's military's public
Okay.
relations department.
Okay.
So they're always sharing videos of strikes that have been carried out. The reason we don't share the strikes is because we were not on ground to see the strike carried out ourselves, and we don't know if it's AI. So we don't want to be thrown into that group of people that are showing things that did not happen.
Right.
When I can clearly say that yes, this is what was hit, then I'll put the video up myself saying this is what was hit. I've seen it with my own eyes. I know where that hit happened. Now, a lot of people are talking about the quote unquote hospital that was hit today in Kabul.
Let me just put one thing in, Khalid.
Yeah.
This particular type of video you're looking at, as you know, but this is in my wheelhouse. For those who aren't aware, in a former life for decades, I was a network and systems engineer, Sun Microsystems, Oracle, and Red Hat. With all of this diffusion, so you see all these areas that have no clarity to them, it's the easiest type of AI video to claim to people it's legit when it's not. If you take the individual, like if this is not 30 frames per second, but if it was 30 frames per second, it means you have 30 static images per second, and you start, analyzing them. Just at a quick look, somebody like myself who's trained in doing this stuff, I can't say if it's AI or not, because it legitimate footage actually looks this degraded sometimes. So I would have to take this, would probably take me a good 15, 20 minutes at least to dissect it and say for sure. So all I'm getting at is if you take this video and you drop it on something and ask if it's AI, it may return a false positive or it may return a false negative because of all that diffusion. But sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Chris, if you remember, I sent you a couple of videos of strikes we were carrying out, and they were taken off of the dashboard that we had inside the war room, and you could see the quality of the video.
Mm-hmm.
If you compare the quality of that video to the quality of this video, you automatically have a doubt. Because what I sent you was a clear video. You could see the missile hit, you could see the drone hit on the target, and you watch the target explode. It was not this diffused. When I look at video like this, I start going, well, maybe not. No, that can't be the target. Because we get videos as well. I mean, we get a lot of videos sent to us as well from inside of Afghanistan when targets are hit. But our own policy is we don't put them up because, one, it looks like we're celebrating the attack, which is not what we want to be seen as doing. Our job is to provide analysis of what was hit, the capability that was taken out from the Taliban, and how it affects the war in Pakistan and the war globally. Showing stuff like this is looking for engagement and clicks and a lot of reshares. You cannot claim with credibility that this is a correct video. And I will not put my reputation up against something like this and say, yeah, that's something that actually happened.
Well, while you're talking away, I'm going to pull it down and have a quick look at it because you're probably right, but we'll have a quick look at it. Let me see here. Moving on to another one. Technical malfunction occurred in the Iranian Khabar Shikan missile. Its warheads failed to detonate in the air. The result, cluster explosions inside a building in Tel Aviv, causing a direct hit that collapsed the entire structure and killed everyone inside. No idea if this is real or not.
Get back! Come down!
Comments on that, Khalid?
Right. Two questions, Chris. The Israeli government has put a ban out on putting any kind of video or pictures up of the damage side of Israel. So how is there somebody standing there with a this is like watching the 9/11 video, the guy with the camera fixed on the World Trade Center and recording the entire thing. How is someone able to literally stand there and watch a missile strike, know exactly when it's going to hit and where it's going to hit? So I have my doubt number one there. Yep. Number two, the way the building exploded, that could easily be AI. And again, I fall back to that thing that when you've been on the battlefield and you see how things explode, buildings don't collapse straight down when they're hit with a missile. They detonate out. That went straight down.
Yeah. I'm going to pull it down as well. I just pulled down the other one. I'll do an analysis real time on the air. There's some stuff that went on in Daytona this week. The natives were restless, 5 shootings, and you can see what culture it is there without me even saying anything.
Nuts.
Let me play this one. DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, FBI Director Kash Patel, CIA Director John Ratcliffe are about to testify on terror cells lurking right here in America. Was scheduled for tomorrow. Did they say when it was delayed until, Khalid?
No, they did not put up a date as to when it's delayed until. It's a really interesting paper we did on the SSCI hearing that was supposed to happen tomorrow, because we detailed out the questions that were going to be asked, what we expected the committee to ask, and where we saw Tulsi stumbling, where we saw Radcliffe stumbling, and where we saw Kash Patel stumbling. And we gave you about 7 tells to look at, to watch for, that once they do these things, you know they're lying. You know that they haven't been informed. So if you read that document, and then whenever this Senate hearing happens and watch the Senate hearing, you'll be able to figure out where they actually don't have the intelligence. And right now, when you talk about terror cells inside the United States, Kash Patel is the wrong person to be asking questions, because he has no clue.
Well, he's been denying that all of this stuff's even happening, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
We are working within the system to overthrow the system. Listen to how they plot this by infiltrating our military. This is all part of the jihad operation, which is progressing rapidly. This is their plan for the entire West.
How can we, re-establish the Khilafah again?
So there are 3 methods, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Our brothers from Hizb ut-Tahrir who believe you do some grassroots dawah, you awaken the community, you awaken the ummah, but really you seek power from a select group of elite who will give you nusra, and then you do maybe something like, but not restricted to a military coup, takeover, done.
Yeah.
Then you have our brothers who, I don't like this term, they are what you would call from the jihadi spectrum. They say that no, we cannot seek nusra because they are taghut and the army are taghut. We have to take it by force.
Yep.
We have to establish Islam by force.
Yep.
Then there are those who, even though this movement has developed through the time, they say, well, hold on here. We need to deal with the means that we have, with the mechanisms that we have.
Because of sensitivity, let us not mention certain groups. Okay, so we will do dawah. And we will seek nusra from maybe the
maybe the military elite.
The military elite.
Yeah. As one example.
Yeah. You are working with the system. And also you have put your people in the military.
Or you give dawah to the people already in the military.
Yeah, and then, okay, when they become, those people, when they accept your da'wah, and they become part of you, have to work within the system.
To overthrow the system.
Let her rip, Khalid. If I say what's on the top of my mind, we're probably going to get a strike.
First thing you need to understand, the phrase dawah is related to making a pledge of allegiance to a terror group. The Islamic State has a dawah. The Al-Qaeda has a dawah. That is something that you pledge your allegiance to, the mentality of following through on what the terror group wants to do. The Muslim Brotherhood also has a dawah. What they're talking about in that video is the Muslim Brotherhood's strategy. Work within the system, overthrow the system from inside. What we've seen the Muslim Brotherhood do, and it's the same reason I keep hammering and saying it needs to be called a foreign terror group. They have operatives inside the State Department. They have operatives inside the Department of War. They are literally contractors for the Department of War, Department of State, writing policy papers for both of the key departments of the United States government. You also have, and this is something we have reported to the Canadian military with pictures as well, of serving army officers in the Canadian Armed Forces that have pledged their allegiance to the Islamic State. We've sent them pictures of the people that we've got, that these are people in the Islamic State that are wearing a Canadian military uniform. Based in Toronto, based in Calgary, based in Montreal, based in Vancouver, and we don't understand why the Canadian Armed Forces have not responded in any way to remove them. We have seen training videos that are the Canadian military with Islamic State songs on top of the video, and they're using it for propaganda purposes. This is the level of infiltration that we're dealing with right now in the West. It's the same thing in Europe. It's the same thing in the UK. It's the same thing in the Middle East. Until there is a mentality, a mind shift that we need to stop this ideology cold. That means not allowing Qatar to operate inside the United States at all. No funding, no lobbyists, no embassy. Qatar is the banker for the terrorist world. That's something that people need to understand. The more you have Qatar funding universities, funding policy departments, funding think tanks, the more you have the Hamas, the Hezbollah mentality infiltrating into the US. The more you allow Muslim Brotherhood to operate inside the United States, the more you have people being recruited for Al Qaeda. These are things that the mentality has to shift in the US. And we keep telling people, start calling your congressman and start demanding this, that the Muslim Brotherhood be declared a foreign terror organization. Start going through your Department of War and looking at who has that mentality, that we want to overthrow the government from inside.
Yeah. So the first video, by the way, the one that we showed that claimed it was from the Pakistan government.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that that's legit video. It's just a super low resolution one. I couldn't spot, and then keep in mind, I'm doing a very fast analysis, but I didn't see any of the typical things that you would see indicating it was AI. But this one, I don't even have to dissect it frame by frame. Check this out. See this blue glow over this building? And by the way, there are no confirmed reports of any of these buildings being hit, which is part of the puzzle. But watch as I go through it slowly. That blue glow above the building, do you see it changing?
Yep.
It changes radically. It already has changed radically from where it was way back here. See how wide it is? And then it appears to break in two. And then as we continue to go through it, I picked this apart and I put it down.
You see, even after the building destroyed, that blue glow is still there.
The blue glow is still there, and it has changed shape dramatically. That's like a lot of times when you're creating videos, if you're using videos, that use AI, like look at the blue shifting up top. You can add additional effects like this. They're very easy to spot when you slow it down, have a look at it. That's 100% AI. No ifs, ands, or buts. First one, I'd say 90% sure it's not AI. So take that for whatever.
Here's my problem, Chris. I've seen these drone videos from inside the war room, and they're never that bad. The quality is never that bad. I mean, what we see in the war room is nothing that bad.
It's a low resolution is my guess. It's somebody shared it with somebody else, probably got, squished down vis-a-vis compression. And if it was sent by SMS as opposed to data, then that's kind of what it would look like. So I think it's just a low resolution copy of an actual attack, or an actual hit. But it's not a bad thing. It's not like, it's bad against the Pakistani military. It's just a low quality image. That's all. So while you were talking and discussing these shitbags who are trying to overthrow our country, and for people out there who don't know this, Khalid and I published an article on Saturday, and it's right here. America can deport terror networks right now. And so just go to survivaldispatch.news. And this article, we lay out every single piece of the Constitution and subsequent law that's been upheld at the level of the Supreme Court. We have a shit ton of legal levers that we can pull to get these people out of our country. First and foremost, if someone donates funds, monetary funds to a mosque, and that mosque is preaching violence against Americans in America, that is covered. In other words, that is you are assisting a terrorist organization. It's facilitation, whatever you want to call it. And you can absolutely take these shitbags who've come into our country and been naturalized, denaturalize them, and throw them out. You do not need any new laws on the books. Material support is what the official legal term is for doing it. I don't know if you want to add to that at all or not, Khalid, but we have the means to do it. We just don't have the wherewithal.
The political will's not there, Chris. I mean, that's the argument we've been having for a while with the government, is you have the ability, you have the laws on the books, and you're not using them. It's the reason that we said the Insurrection Act should be enacted when the people were protesting for Antifa across the United States against ICE. It's the reason we have said the Muslim Brotherhood needs to be stopped, because what you're doing is, and I'll lay it out for you, the articles will lay this out in more detail, but what you're actually doing is you've developed a government within a government. And what they're doing is they're funding mosques. Those mosques are taking that money and funding terror groups. So the person who's donating money is actually donating with the intent that it'll be used for good. But the group that's getting the money is funneling to terror groups. So unless you stop the mechanism, and that means the laws that already exist, material support, ideological support, vocally against the United States, if you don't use these laws against them, you are allowing them to operate and overthrow your government. You are creating the environment for them to use themselves.
Yeah, exactly. So I was debating whether or not we should show something on our friend Cyber Pioneer Guido, but I think we're for tonight. And all you got to do is read my comments if y'all are wondering what that's pertaining to. So it's somebody who's an epic AI scammer, like absolutely epic, and passing off AI as being legit. So with that being said, Clee, is there anything else that you want to cover? I'm going through my bookmarks from today. Nothing else is really on topic for tonight's topic. So unless you've got something else you want to throw out there, I think we can put a lid on this thing.
The only thing I want people to understand is, look, you have elected people to your government, and those people are supposed to represent you.
Stand by. Let me get. Oh, you're on the screen. Okay, carry on. Sorry.
Okay. As if you don't act and start pushing your government to stop allowing these things to happen in your country, you've become an active participant in allowing it to happen. The whole point of a democratic government is you have a voice, and the problem we have right now is that most of the representatives in the government that have been elected by the people are working for the people that bought them and not for the people that elected them. We need to switch that power back to the people. You are a republic. The republic means that the power is in the people's hands. And until you start pushing your lawmakers to act against these threats, you're not going to see any changes. And the problem we see right now is when you look at the MAGA government, MAGA is not America first. And it's been said by a number of people inside the administration that America first doesn't mean just America. How does America first not mean just America? The whole statement is America first. So how can you expand that and say, well, it includes other countries and it includes this and it includes this? No, first it's America. America is the threat that everyone has to deal with right now. And inside the US, you have socialists, you have Democrats, you have terrorists, you have jihadis, you have ideologues that are trying to overthrow your government. Unless you become an active voice and start pushing people to act, you are going to see a bloody revolution inside the United States. And that's what we're trying to stop. For the past 6 months, every episode, that's what we've been telling people. Push and act and get ready. If you're not pushing your lawmakers, you have become an active participant. You know what's happening. Why aren't you raising your voice?
Yeah, true story, Khalid. So just a couple quick things to wrap up. Q1 is always, the first quarter is always slow for anything that's like tangible goods being sold. It's just the cycle of American spending. Q4 obviously is off the chain. Q2 and 3 are about equal. But I want to stress to people that when you purchase anything from Carnival or Wasatch Wagyu, that keeps them on as one of our sponsors. And what that means is that we can do the things that we do. We can work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week to bring you the truth, bring you exclusive information. But if we don't get enough patronage for these guys, then they don't stick around and continue to help us. And here's the deal. It's $15,000 a month just in recurring expenses at Survival Dispatch. Over $5,000 in software subscriptions. It's almost $6,000 a month now. Over $4,000 a month Clear Start background checks, so we can check people before we put them into the Guardians. And over $5,000 on other things like server hosting, website hosting, not the same as server hosting, and the list goes on. But there, like I say, we have over $15,000 a month in recurring expenses. When I acquired the assets to this company, it was losing $400,000 a year. We've managed, after my wife and I have spent a tremendous amount of money on it, to get Survival Dispatch to the place where it breaks even, which is where it needs to stay for longevity's sake. I'm not asking you for any money for Survival Dispatch. What I'm asking you to do is go to our sponsors like WasatchWagyu.com, use the code SD20. So Survival Dispatch 20, get 20% off. When you buy this product, you get a discount. We don't get affiliate money from Wasatch Wagyu or Carnival. They help us defer those bills. If the bills don't get deferred, my wife and I only have so much savings that we can pump into something like Survival Dispatch before it becomes, well, unaffordable sort of thing. This is the best meat in the country, 100% American, no antibiotics, no mRNA, no histamines, none of that shit. The bag's made in America. The O2 absorbers are made in America. The owners of this company, hardcore Americans. Last year, beef went up 49% year over year wholesale cost. Lock in your price with a Carnival subscription. Your price won't change for 12 months on the subscription. They start as low as $99 a month. And then you send the receipt. You send your monthly receipt, support at survivaldispatch.com, and I will give you a free Guardians membership. Give you 30 days every time you send it. So theoretically, you never have to pay a penny to Survival Dispatch, but they continue to help us. Same thing goes for Wasatch Wagyu. You spend over $99 or you sign up for a subscription with these guys, forward it to support at survivaldispatch.com, and we'll look after you. You get grade A products, American products, all American companies. And, you know, the side effect to it is that it helps keep Survival Dispatch running and all of the expensive stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So I think that's about it as far as tonight's episode is concerned, Khalid. Of course, we'll be back tomorrow evening, usual time, 7 p.m. Eastern, with not the next episode in our Long War series. We've got a special report diving a little bit deeper into the Middle East, Iran, and sleeper cells. And for those of you who watched our epic 12-hour broadcast on November 5th, 2024, you met Chuck and Bruce, Chuck Neagle and Bruce the Moose. Those two guys will be back tomorrow night. It's been quite some time. They're hardcore Americans. They're awesome guys. Very, very entertaining. It's going to be an amazing episode. I can't speak for Khalid because his schedule's in a state of flux with all hell breaking loose over there. But at the very least, it'll be myself, Chuck, and Bruce the Moose. And hopefully Khalid can join us as well. Then we'll resume the Long War series on Wednesday, which, by the way, as of right this moment in time, we were down to 23 episodes left in the Long War series. And that will conclude the 144 videos of the Long War series. But we got something special planned for you after that, right, Khalid?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Something very special. So, you know, that's it. Make sure you check out tomorrow night's broadcast with Bruce and Chuck, and hopefully Khalid. It's going to be friggin' awesome. But between now and then, do me a favor. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. God bless our law enforcement officers. God bless our troops. God bless America. And enjoy the closing video. It's a brand new one. If you're watching live, you get to see it. If you're not watching live, we're going to get hit with a copyright infringement like we always do. So I'll take it off. So if you're watching this recorded, you don't get the video. If you watch it live, you get the closing video. But that's it. Here we go. God bless y'all.